The Rise of Kyoshi by FCE with Michael Dante DiMartino. The decision. The sunrise after the storm had no idea what Kyoshi had been through. It shined its warm hues of orange through the clouds like a loud bore of a friend insisting that everything would work out. The waves below flowed neatly under the steady breeze, making it appear that they were flying over the scaled skin of a giant fish. Fighting the weather throughout the night had blasted them body and mind. Peng Peng's flight path was starting to ramble. But they were no longer in danger from wind and lightning. It was as good a time as any to address the other life-shattering piece of news. Rangi rubbed at the dark shadows under her eyes. "You're the Avatar," she said. She spread her fingers and stared at the back of her hands, checking whether she was intoxicated or dreaming. "After all of this, it's you. You really had no idea until now." Kyoshi shook her head. "I don't know what went wrong with the search when we were younger, but from what Kelsang told me, it sounded like a complete mess. No one knew. Not even..." It was difficult to spit out his name. "Not even Zhang Shu." "I've never heard of this happening before," Rangi said. She closed and opened her fists to make sure they were still working. "At least not in Fire Nation history. When the Fire Sages reveal the Avatar, it's a done deal." Kyoshi fought the urge to roll her eyes. Of course, in the Fire Nation, the caravans arrived on time, and the identity of the most important person in the world was never in doubt. "And then there's a festival," Rangi said, lost in thought. "According to tradition, there's a celebration bigger than Twin Sunday. We eat special foods like spiral-shaped noodles. School is cancelled. Do you know how rare it is for the school to be cancelled in the Fire Nation?" "Rangi, what does that have to do with anything?" The Firebender stretched her elbows behind her back, her mind made up. "My point is that there are set ways this is supposed to pan out," she said. "If you're the Avatar, you need the trappings of the Avatar. You need to find masters who know what they're doing to recognize your legitimacy and give you the right guidance." Rangi vaulted over the saddle edge onto Peng Peng's neck and took up the reins. The bison dipped lower over the shimmering water. Up ahead, a small crag jutted from the surface, a finger of rock poking through the ocean sheet. It was too steep for ships to use it as a dock, but there were a few level surfaces near the top covered in soft green moss. "I'm going to drop you off here where you can camp safely," Rangi said. "There's a protocol in the event the compound came under attack and I had to flee with the Avatar. Those bags were pre-packed. There's everything you need for a week in them. Once I return to the village and figure the situation out, I'll bring someone who can help." "No." She couldn't go to another master, especially not a well-known one. Any Earthbender in a position to aid her was more likely than not to be part of Zhang Shu's web. Looking back on her time at the house, she'd seen the evidence of his reach every day. The gifts, the ceremonious visits, and the dedicated letters were simply tokens that marked the flow of power and control in the Earth Kingdom. And for as long as she'd known, it all filtered up to Zhang Shu. Kyoshi scrambled over to Rangi and yanked the reins out of her hands. Peng Peng swerved to the side and roared in complaint. "Stop that!" Rangi shouted. "Rangi, please. You'd only be sending me right back into his hands." Kyoshi nearly bit through her tongue as she remembered the horror Zhang Shu unleashed from deep within the mountain and his complete callousness while he did so. Rangi couldn't have known the extent of her fear. Kyoshi was certain the man hadn't shown that side of himself to anyone but her and Yun. Rangi fought with her for the reins. "Let go, you're being ridiculous. Rangi, as your Avatar, I command you." The Firebender recoiled like she'd been struck by a whip. The order wasn't one of Yun's jokes. It was an exploitation of Rangi's oath to protect and obey the Avatar. An attack on her honor. Rangi blew a long strand of black hair out of her face. It didn't go very far, the end of it sticking to her mouth. "Suppose I have to get used to you saying that." There was an agonizing distance in her voice, and Kyoshi despised it. She didn't want a professional bodyguard obeying her orders. She wanted her Rangi, who scolded her without hesitation and never backed down. They spent a long time in silence, listening to the breeze pick up. "Yun is gone," Rangi said. "He's really gone." Her voice seemed thin, drawn out by the passing wind like the notes of a flute. She sounded hollow inside. Kyoshi had no comfort to give her. Both of their lives had centered around duty. Kyoshi for the sake of survival, Rangi's for pride and glory. But Yun had managed to pierce both their shells. Their friend had been stolen, and as far as Kyoshi was concerned, There was a single path laid out before her that she could take in response, lit by the clean, bright fires of hatred. I'm not ready to confront Jiangsu, Kyoshi said. I'm not nearly strong enough yet. I have to find bending masters who can teach me to fight and who aren't in his pockets. In fact, it was more than that. She'd need teachers who were completely unknown to Jiangsu. If he suspected she was after training, he'd look for her in schools around the Four Nations. And she'd have to conceal she was the Avatar. That news would spread so fast it would act as a beacon for Jiangsu, allowing him to close in on her before she was prepared. She didn't have a good idea how she'd obtain instruction in all four elements without giving the game up. But she'd make it work somehow. The idea sounded ludicrous in her head. It was ludicrous. And yet, Kyoshi knew she would walk off this cliff without hesitation. She would stick both hands into a dragon's mouth if it meant the slightest chance she could pay back Jiangsu what she owed him. Rangi dragged her hand down her face. Fine, bending masters. Where do you want to look first? You're talking like you have a plan, so let's hear it. You're not coming with me, Kyoshi said. I have to do this alone. The firebender gave her a look of such utter contempt for that notion that it could have been grounds for an Agni Kai. Kyoshi was afraid this might happen. Rangi's powerful faith, the need to fulfill her duty, would spiral around with no spot to land on but her. She had to stand strong. She'd lost so much already, and she wasn't going to risk her one remaining connection to this world on a fool's quest. You're not coming with me, Kyoshi repeated. As your avatar, I command you to stay behind. Rangi, I'm serious. She wanted to sound angry, but the effect was ruined by the overwhelming tide of relief she felt at Rangi's rejection of her demand. A strictly professional servant of the Avatar couldn't disobey her, but a companion might. I have no idea how long this journey will take, Kyoshi said, and there are secrets about me that I haven't told you. Oh no, Kyoshi's keeping a secret from me, Rangi moaned an octave lower than normal. I think I'll be okay with whatever your little revelation is, given the last thing you sprung on me was only the most important piece of information on the planet. The crag passed them by, a silent onlooker that wanted no part of the conversation. The last marker of reason in an ocean of uncertainty. From this point onward, there was nothing but trouble ahead. But at least Kyoshi had her friend back. We need to rest, or we'll lose effectiveness, Rangi declared, nestling herself under the corner of a tarp that had come loose. If you've got a destination in mind, then I'm taking the first sleep shift. You owe me that much. Rangi. Kyoshi tried one last time to growl in threat. Instead, the name came out like a dedication of thanks to the spirits for this fiery blessings of a girl. It was futile trying to mask how Kyoshi felt toward her. Where you go, I go. The firebender rolled to her side and yawned. Besides, there's only one bison rock for brains. We can't split up now. Despite how tired they were, Rangi only dozed fitfully, shivering though it was no longer cold. Watching her from a distance, Kyoshi had an answer regarding the little snips of breath she'd listened to for so long in their shared tent on the iceberg. It was how Rangi cried in her sleep. Every so often, she would burrow her face into her shoulders to wipe her tears. With their eyes on each other, it was easy to be brave. Maybe that's the only way we get through this, Kyoshi thought. Just never look away. She stared at the water until the sun's reflection became too much, and then reached for her single bag of belongings. Digging around, she found the clay turtle. It was made of earth. It was tiny. She could use it for practice. Small, she thought as she cradled it with both hands. Precise, silent, small. She curled her lips in concentration. It was like crooking the tip of her pinky while wiggling her opposite ear. She needed a whole-body effort to keep her focus sufficiently narrow. There was another reason why she didn't want to seek instruction from a famous bending master with sterling reputation and wisdom to spare. Such a teacher would never let her kill Jiangsu in cold blood. Her hunger to learn all four elements had nothing to do with becoming a fully realized avatar. Fire, air, and water were simply more weapons she could bring to bear on a single target. And she had to bring her earthbending up to speed too. Small. Precise. The turtle floated upward, trembling in the air. It wasn't steady the way bent earth should be, more of a wobbling top on its last few spins. But she was bending it, the smallest piece of earth she'd ever managed to control. A minor victory, This was only the beginning of her path. She would need much more practice to see Zhang Shu broken in pieces before her feet, to steal his world away from him the way he had stolen hers, to make him suffer as much as possible before she ended his miserable, worthless life. There was a sharp crack. The turtle fractured along innumerable fault lines. The smallest parts, the blunt little tail and squat legs, crumbled first. The head fell off and bounced over the edge of the saddle. She tried to close her grip around the rest of it and caught only dust. The powdered clay slipped between her fingers and was taken by the breeze. Her only keepsake of Kelsang flew away on the wind. Adaptation. Zhang Shu pushed open the doors of his house to find it in static, silent chaos. The servants lined up in rows to the left and right, bowing as the master entered, forming a human aisle of deference for him to walk through. It was overly formal, a practice he'd dismissed long ago. He hadn't bothered to clean himself before entering, so he left a trail of dust and rubble in his wake. There was an ache in his chest as he passed the bashed-in door to his study, a testament to his Airbender friend's great strength and personal conviction. He had no time to grieve for what had happened to Kelsang. He went straight to the Avatar's room in the staff quarters, followed the path of the damage outside to the empty bison pen, and then back to his cowering servants in a loop. "Can someone tell me what happened here?" he said in what he thought was an admirably neutral, collected tone given the circumstances. Instead of answering, they shrank further into their shoulders, quaking. Whoever spoke up first was sure to take the blame. "They're afraid of me," he thought, to the point they can't do their jobs properly. He cursed the fact that the girl had no official supervisor watching her, and pointed at his head cook, Mew. He'd seen the Avatar doing favors for the woman in the kitchen. "Where is Kyoshi?" he said, snapping his fingers. Mew went crimson. "I don't know. I'm so sorry, Master. None of us had ever seen her act that way before. She had a weapon. By the time we could find a guardsman, she was gone." "Did any of the guests see her leave?" Mew shook her head. "Most of them left early to try and beat the storm, and the others were in their rooms in the far wing." He supposed it wasn't the middle-aged cook's fault that she was unable to stop a rampaging, axe-wielding teenager who could break a mountain whenever she remembered she had the ability. Zhang Shu dismissed the staff without another word. Better to have them uncertain, fearing his next command. He drifted through the halls of the house until he found himself in an aisle of the gallery, staring at some of the artwork but not seeing it. That was where Heiran found him after she returned from an offshore meeting with a delegation from the Fire Navy. She frowned at his appearance, ever the disciplinarian. "You look like he was spat out by a badger mole," she said. Better to tear off this bandage quickly. He told her the version of events she needed to hear. Kyoshi being the true Avatar. The disappearance of both Yoon and Kelsang caused by a treacherous spirit. The Avatar holding a grudge against him for it. She slapped him across the face, which was about as good a result as he could get. "How can you stand there like that?" she hissed, her bronze eyes darkening with fury. "How can you just stand there?" Zhang Shu worked his jaw, making sure it wasn't broken. "Would you rather I sit?" A less controlled person than Heiran would have been tempted to scream in disbelief to the skies, letting the secret out. "You had the wrong Avatar. You introduced a boy to the world as its savior and then got him killed. You let the real Avatar run off to who knows where. Our oldest and closest friend is dead because of you." He was grateful for Heiran's iron character. She thought those things at him instead of saying them, fuming strategically. "How are you not going to lose face over this?" she whispered. "All of your credibility. What are you going to do?" "I don't know." He leaned against the gallery wall, as surprised at his own response as she was. Out of Kuruk's companions, he had been the planner. Normally, Zhang Shu had every contingency, every fork in the road mapped out to its logical end. He found the change of pace rather liberating. Heiran couldn't believe he was drifting like this. She pulled her lips back over her teeth. "We can minimize the damage if we get her back quickly," she said. "She can't have gone far on her own. She's a maid, for crying out loud. I'll send Rangi to hunt her down. The two of them are friends. She'll know where Kyoshi would run to." Heiran found the nearest summoning rope and gave it a yank. The soft yellow cables ran throughout the house, held by eyelets across certain walls. The bells at the other ends let the staff know where help was needed. Given that his employees were busy avoiding him like the plague, It was a minute or two before someone answered. Rin or Lin or whatever. The girl was out of breath. She limped slightly, like she'd stubbed her toe in her hurry to arrive. Rin, please fetch my daughter, Heiran said kindly. Tell her it's very important. I'm so sorry, Rin shrieked. She was trying so hard not to mince her words in fright that she erred on the side of ear-splitting volume. Miss Rangi's disappeared. One of the stable hands said he saw her leave with Kyoshi last night. Rin, please leave my sight immediately, Heiran said with warmth of a different kind this time. The girl bowed and backed away, eyes lowered, socked feet, thumping a pattern down the hallway that was almost as fast and loud as her heartbeat. Zhang Shu waited until she vanished around the corner. Before you hit me again, he said to Heiran, I believe whatever Rangi does is your fault, not mine. Her face contorted like she was living 1,000 lifetimes right then and there, in most of which she melted his eyeballs using his skull as a cauldron. This is a positive, Zhang Shu said. Your daughter will keep her safe until we find them. Until we find them, Heiran screamed in whisper. My daughter is an elite warrior trained in escape and evasion. You can already forget about an easy chase. She thrashed in place, the waves of bad news buffeting around her, challenging her equilibrium. When she came to a stop, her face was lined with deep sorrow. Zhang Shu, Kelsang is dead, she said. Our friend is dead, and instead of mourning him, we're standing here plotting how to maintain our grip on the Avatar. What has become to us? What has happened to us? What have we become? We've grown old and become responsible is what, Zhang Shu said. Kelsang made the same promise to Kuruk that we did. We can honor his memory, both of their memories, by continuing on our path. He found his usual energy coming back, his dalliance with helplessness finished. There had been too many futures to consider before. The individual degrees of catastrophe were overwhelming. But really, he only needed to focus on one solution, the piece that was critical to every scenario. We'll get the Avatar back, he said. Finding ourselves would be ideal, obviously, but it'll be fine if she turns up on the doorstep of another sage to seek refuge. I'll find out and respond quick enough to smother the news from traveling further. He wasn't worried about the Avatar hiding in the other nations either. His personal networks extended further than the Earth Kingdom's diplomacy. If anything, his foreign contacts would inform him faster and with more discretion, hoping to avoid an international incident. And what if she falls in with one of Hugh's allies? Heiran asked. Zhang Shu grimaced at the mention of the Chamberlain's name. I suppose that's always a risk, but I'm fairly certain she wouldn't know who he is or which masters he's got his hooks into. I don't even know who's sided with him yet. Zhang Shu got off the wall. My reputation will certainly take an unavoidable hit once we have to reveal her identity to the world, but that won't matter in the end, he said. As long as the girl is back here when we do it, under my roof, following my orders, it will all work out. I have capital to burn within the Earth Kingdom. Time to put it to good use. Heiran grudgingly appreciated her friend's return to his usual self. Doesn't sound like the girl wants to be here. We'll worry about that later. Besides, she's still a child. She'll learn what's in her best interests. He dusted himself off, the first attempt he'd made to get rid of the filth of the mining town so far. The plan molded itself together in his head like clay under the guidance of an invisible tool. I need you to write a letter for me. Heiran looked at him sideways. I know, he said. You're not my secretary, but there has to be a Fire Nation stamp on this message. Fine, who's it to? Professor Shaw, head of zoology at Ba Sing Se University. Tell him you're interested in borrowing some specimens he brought back from his latest expedition. You want to display them in the Fire Nation because they're so very adorable and cuddly as part of a goodwill tour between our countries. Zhang Shu eyed the piece of art behind him, a painting of the Northern Lights on vellum by a master water tribe artist. He grabbed its wide frame with his outstretched hands and ripped it off its moorings. Send him this as well to butter him up. It's worth more than what he makes in a year. Heiran seemed slightly disgusted by his reliance on bribery, but that was an Earth Kingdom cultural quirk that people from the other 3 nations had often trouble getting used to. What adorable and cuddly animals are we talking about? She said. Zhang Shu twisted his lips and sniffed. The Sheshus. The introduction. Kyoshi struggled to open the small metal box. She'd opened the visible latch, yes, but no matter how hard she gripped and twisted the container, The false bottom that concealed the true contents wouldn't budge. "You can't force it," a gentle voice said. "Use too much strength and it's liable to break. The goods would spill everywhere. You don't want to leave a trail behind, do you?" Kyoshi looked up from the floor to see a tall, beautiful woman with freckles splashed across the tops of her cheeks and serpent tattoos running down her arms. Next to her was a man, stocky and strong, his face bedecked in red and white makeup. The streaks of crimson met each other to form a wild, animalistic pattern, but his expression underneath was warm and mirthful. The metal box suddenly grew hot, singeing Kyoshi's flesh, and she dropped it. She tried to shout and found her teeth loose and swimming in her mouth. The painted man wiped his face, and in the streaks between the colors, his features had turned into Zhang Shu's. Kyoshi surged forward with rage, but couldn't close the distance. The woman found her helplessness amusing and winked at her with a green, glowing eye. Her eyeball swelled and swelled, growing so large that it burst out of its socket and kept expanding until it consumed her other eye, and then the entirety of her face, and then the four corners of the world. Kyoshi flailed in terror inside the cavernous darkness of its pupil, trying to reach solid ground. "We'll never leave you," Zhang Shu whispered. "You will always have us, in the distance, behind you, right next to you, watching you. The two of us will always be there for you." At the height of her panic, a hand gripped Kyoshi by the shoulder. The warmth and solidness of it told her not to flinch, not to worry. She sat up slowly and blinked in the fading daylight. "Wake up," Rangi said. "We're here." Rangi insisted on making a single pass over Chameleon Bay before landing. She leaned off Peng Peng's side, drawing in the layout of the ramshackle port town with the single-mindedness of a buzzard wasp, as if every trash-strewn alley and patchy roof were vitally important. Kyoshi let Rangi take her time. She needed a moment to make sure she'd fully climbed out the depths of her nightmare. After she collected her thoughts, she joined in on looking. To Kyoshi, the mass of buildings was indistinguishable, a curving scab around the bay that should have been picked off long ago. There was only one location that she was interested in, the one that matched the description in her journal. "There," she said, pointing at one of the few structures that rose out of a single story. The yellow roof stood out among its green neighbors like a diseased leaf. "That should be Madame Gigi's tea house." They pulled up, retracing their route through the sky. There was no place to land Peng Peng within the town limits, and a sky bison with no airbender on it was surely one of the first signs Zhang Shu would order his network to search for. The reconnaissance sweep itself had risks. The small copse they found on the outskirts felt like a dose of luck. Perhaps their reserves of good fortune would be drained by the simple act of hiding Peng Peng in the trees. "We'll be back, girl," Kyoshi said to her, stroking the beast's nose. Peng Peng gently bumped her with her skull, telling her they'd better. Kyoshi and Rangi set out on foot. The pressure of firm ground against their soles a welcome sensation after so much flying. As they followed a dirt path into Port Chameleon Bay, they were treated to a ground-level view of the town in all its glory. It was a miserable sight. For the past 9 years, Kyoshi had never laid eyes on open flat land going to waste without some attempt to grow food on it. But the dusty, hard-packed fields they passed through made it clear it wasn't worth trying. The ground here was rawhide, impenetrable. The port sustained life in the barest sense. They encountered a surrounding band of slums, wooden lean-tos, and moth-eaten tents. The inhabitants stared at them with glassed eyes, not bothering to adjust their bodies from where they sprawled. The few who stood up, in wariness that they might be hostile, were hunched by malnutrition and sickness. "People shouldn't live like this," Rangi said. Kyoshi felt her sinews tying into knots. "They can and they do," she said as casually as she could. "That's not what I mean." Rangi rubbed her own elbow, considering the pros and cons of what she was about to say. "I know about the time you spent in Yokoya on your own, before Master Kelsang took you in, even though you tried to hide it from me." Kyoshi's stride faltered, but she gathered herself and kept going. They couldn't stop here simply because her friend wanted to have a heart-to-heart about one of the oldest, deepest scars running through her soul. "Auntie Miu told me," Rangi said. "Kyoshi, you should never have been put through that experience. The thought of the other villagers ignoring you when you needed them, it makes me sick. That's why I was always pushing you to fight back." Kyoshi laughed bitterly. She'd long laid the blame for those years on different parties than the Yokoyans. What was I supposed to do? Drop the mountain on them? Smack around a bunch of children half my size? Anything I did would have been completely disproportionate. She shook her head, wanting to change the subject. Anyway, is a Fire Nation so perfect that prosperity gets shared with every citizen? No, Rangi said. Her lips scrunched to the side. But maybe one day it could be. They entered the town proper, the edges marked by a change to brick and clay shanties, some of them earth-bent into being and others laid by hand. The streets twisted and angled like they'd been set over animal paths instead of following human needs. If it hadn't been for the landmark of the tea house jutting above the roofline, Kyoshi would have been lost after a few steps. The merchants who'd closed up shop for the night had done so with vigor, coating their storefronts in so many locks and iron bars that she wondered how some of them afforded the expense. A number of deer dogs, hidden behind walls and fences, set off barking as they passed. No one bothered them, thankfully. Reaching the tea house felt like making it through a field of tripwires. Madame Chiji was an island in the haphazard layout of the town, ringed by the broadest avenue of open space they'd seen so far. It was as if someone had aggressively claimed the public square and plunked down the wooden building in the center. Light flickered through the paper windows. They stepped onto the large creaking porch, approaching cautiously. There was an old man sprawled across the doorway, wrapped in canvas blankets, blocking their entry. His loud snores caused his wispy white beard to flutter like cobwebs in the breeze. Kyoshi was debating whether to prod him gently or try leaping over him when he woke up with a start, grumbling at the impact his shoulder made with the doorframe. He blinked at her and frowned. "Who are you?" he mumbled. She noticed his hands shaking as they poked out from his cocoon. From hunger, no doubt. She hadn't given enough thought to money as she made her get away from the mansion, but there were a few coppers in the pockets she'd sewn into her dress long ago. She fished the coins out and placed them on the porch in front of him. If the instructions in her journal were correct, she and Rangi wouldn't have any need for money once they were inside. "Get yourself something to eat, grandfather," she said. The old man smiled at her, his wrinkles clawing over his face. But his happy expression turned to outright shock when Rangi added a silver piece to the pile. Kyoshi glanced back at her. "What?" Rangi said. "Weren't we just talking about this kind of thing?" The inside of Madame Gigi's was only halfway finished. The ground level was dedicated to serving food and drink. Tables for visitors were arranged over a layer of straw and sand. But where there should have been a second floor with rooms for overnight guests and wearied travelers, there was no floor. Doors floated in the walls 12 feet off the ground with no ways to reach them. No mezzanine, no stairs. The handful of hooded figures sitting in the corners didn't seem to think that was unusual, nor did they look up as Kyoshi and Rangi came in. If anything, they leaned further into their cups of tea, trying to remain inconspicuous. Kyoshi and Rangi took seats in the middle. Near them was an exquisite, heavily constructed pie show table, by far the nicest object in the room. It sat on 4 sturdy legs, surrounded by ratty floor cushions, a jewel nestled in the petals of a wilted flower. They were in the right place, and they were in the right chairs. It was supposed to be only a matter of time before someone came over and said the phrase she was waiting for. For Kyoshi, it was an eternity. The pie show table was an agonizing reminder of Yoon, and she didn't need a visual aid to feel the raw wound of losing Kelsang. That pain was a bleeding trail leading back to Yokoya. It would never wash away. Rangi kicked her chair. A man made his way over to them. A young man, really. A boy. Each step he took into the better-lit center of the room regressed how old he looked. His sleeves were bound with thin strands of leather, and he wore head wraps in the style of Si Wong tribes. They hung loose around his face and neck, framing his barely contained fury. Kyoshi could sense Rangi getting ready for the worst, gathering and storing up violence to unleash if things went wrong. "What would you like to drink?" the boy said through his teeth. Here it was, the moment of truth. The instructions in the journal were wrong, then her vaunted single path forward would be cut off at the first step. "Jasmine picked in fall, scented at noon, and steeped to boil," Kyoshi said. Such a combination didn't exist, or if it did, it would have tasted like liquid disaster. The reply came out of his mouth like it needed to be dragged by Komodo rhinos, but it was the reply she was looking for. "We have every color blossom known to man and spirit," he said. Red and white will suffice, she replied. He clearly had been hoping for any response but that one. Lao Gi, the boy suddenly shouted toward the door. You were supposed to keep watch, you useless piece of dung. The old man who'd been lying across the porch leaned halfway inside. He was suddenly much less infirm than when they'd first met. I was standing guard, but then those two lovely young women gave me enough money to buy a drink or 10, he said with a big toothy grin. They must have slipped by me while I stepped out to the wine shop. Quite the tricksters, those two. He tilted a liquor bottle to his lips and drank deeply, his ragged sleeve falling down his arm to reveal sheaves of corded muscle under papery skin. The boy ground the heel of his hand into one of his eyes. He stormed away to the kitchen, muttering expletives at the old man the whole way. Kyoshi could sympathize. Rangi leaned on the table. Though her pose was relaxed, her eyes fluttered around the room, sizing the occupants up, including and especially Lao Gi, who was busy finding the bottom of his second bottle of drink. You know, she whispered to Kyoshi, you told me we were going to Dao Fei hideout. You told me you were going to get access to help through Dao Fei code. Here we are. I heard you speak it, and yet I still can't believe this is happening. Still not too late for you to get out of here and save your honor, Kyoshi said. It's not my honor I'm worried about, Kyoshi hissed. Before they could get further into the matter, the boy returned with a tray of steaming cups. He placed one in front of Kyoshi, Rangi, and then himself, taking a seat across from them. He was much calmer now. It may have had less to do with the tea than with the backup that slowly filled in behind him. A huge man in his 30s, as tall as Kelsang and half again as thick, blotted out the lamplight coming in from the kitchen. He had a smooth, clean-shaven face over a body that threatened to burst from expensive robes, his clothes having been chosen for flash over fit. Kyoshi saw Rangi's eyes dart to the man's feet instead of his scarred knuckles or protruding gut, and realized why. As big as he was, he hadn't made the floorboards creak. One of the doors suspended in the wall above the ground flew open. A young woman stepped out of the room, not caring about the drop that awaited her. She was dressed in an Earth Kingdom tunic, but with a fur skirt over her trousers. Kyoshi had seen pelts like that worn by visitors from the poles. The stronger indication of the woman's water tribe heritage was her piercing, sapphire blue eyes that no amount of spider snake formula could possibly hide. She landed on the ground with her toes pointed like a dancer's. Kyoshi could have sworn she'd fallen slower than normal, a feather's descent. It was the only way to explain how she made the journey from the second story to the table without breaking stride or the bones in her foot. She stood behind the other shoulder of the boy, her wolf-like features unreadable as she assessed Kyoshi and Rangi. I'm not afraid, Kyoshi told herself, finding to her surprise that it was true. She tussled with the Lord of the Eastern Sea. A single street-level Dao Fei crew wasn't going to intimidate her. The boy in the desert hat tented his fingers. You come in here, total strangers unannounced, he said. I have the right, Kyoshi said. I gave the passwords. You are obligated to provide me and my partner Suka by the oaths of blood you have taken, lest you suffer the punishments of many knives. You see, that's just it. The boy slouched back in his chair. You're using these big old-timey words like you got these grand ideas of how this is supposed to work. You rattle off a senior code that we haven't heard in years like you're pulling rank on us. You did it like you were reading from an instruction manual. Kyoshi swallowed involuntarily. The boy noticed and smiled. He tilted his head at Rangi. Coupled with the fact that Gorgeous over here practically screams army brat, it makes me think the two of you are lawmen. We're not, Kyoshi said, swearing silently inside her head at how badly this was going. We're not abiders. There were 3 men scattered around the tea house who were not part of their little confrontation. They all hastily plunked down coins and beat it out the door, eyes wide with fright. The boy placed the small, hard object on the table with a click. Kyoshi thought it was a pie show tile at first, but he withdrew his hand to reveal an oblong stone, polished smooth by a river or a grinder. I'm pretty good at spotting an undercover, the boy said, and I think this is your story. Your daddy bought you an officer's commission from a crooked governor, and the first thing you decide to do with it is play detective and come knocking on our door. He thumbed at Rangi. She was assigned to watch your back, but she didn't do a very good job because you're here now and you're going to die. The calls will be recorded as acute terminal stupidity. Kyoshi could almost hear Rangi's thought process, counted the limbs of the 3 people across from them, calculating out the sequence of damage she'd inflict. I'm telling you, we're not lawmen. The boy angrily kneed the underside of the table hard, knocking over the teacups and spilling liquid across the surface. Kyoshi acted before she thought, but in retrospect, it was more about stopping Rangi than anything else. She kicked upward as well, the entire foundation of the tea house, the patch of earth it was built on, jumbled by half an inch. The boy nearly fell out of his chair. His two bodyguards wobbled. The shocked looks of their faces said that didn't happen very often, not with the large man's stability and the Water Tribe girl's impeccable balance. Kyoshi spoke over the groans of resettling wood and the dust-drifting clouds around them. "You're right," she said. "I don't belong here." They didn't bum rush her immediately, deciding that she needed to be attacked with caution. That brought her time to speak. "The truth is that I despise Dai, Kyoshi said. "I hate your kind. It makes me sick to be in your presence. You're worse than animals." Kyoshi?" Rangi said as the big guy and the woman sidled into better flanking positions. "Not sure where you're going with this." The boy remained where he was. Kyoshi could tell he wanted to put up a brave front. So did she. "That doesn't matter right now," Kyoshi said, staring through the hardening layer of rage in his eyes. "You are going to give me everything I demand, because you are bound by your outlaw code. You will do as I say because your idiotic, clownish make-believe traditions." Her blood sang in her ears. Her hand went to her belt. The man and woman would certainly interpret that as the signal to attack. She was aware of Rangi leaving her seat. Only by moving faster did Kyoshi prevent complete disaster. She slammed one of the war fans on the table, its ribs spread wide to reveal the golden leaf. The waterbender and the big guys stopped in their tracks. The boy looked like someone had reached into his chest and seized his heart. "Spirits above," Laogi said. "That's Jess's fan." The sudden appearance of the old man at the table startled both sides equally. He'd managed to squeeze in between Rangi and Kyoshi without them noticing, and he'd leaned inward, giddily examining the details of the weapon. The boy leaped out of his seat. "Where did you get that?" he shouted. "I inherited it," Kyoshi said, her pulse racing. "From my parents." The Water Tribe girl looked at her with wonder. "You're Jess's daughter?" she said. "Jessa and Hark were your mother and father." Kyoshi didn't know why she was getting more worked up over simple facts than the prospect of a brawl earlier. "That's right," she said. It felt like her mouth had become her stomach, unwieldy and sour. "My parents founded this group. They're your bosses." "Our baby has come home," Laogi crowed. "This calls for a drink." He stepped back so he could have room to pour a third bottle into his gullet. The boy was still angry, but in a different flavor now. "We need to confer for a minute." He snatched up his rock from the table and pointed accusingly at Kyoshi. "In the meantime, I suggest you get your story straight, because you have a lot of explaining to do." "Yes," Rangi said. "She does." Laogi perched on a table off to the side with its containers of booze, like a strange bird arranging shiny objects in its nest. The rest of the gang filed back to the kitchen without him. Given that they seemed to treat him like background furniture, Kyoshi could only do the same. She turned to Rangi and found the firebender giving her a critical stare. "What?" Kyoshi said. "This happened exactly the way I said it would. We're in. This is the first step to gain access to this world." Rangi remained unmoved. "I told you everything before we landed," Kyoshi said. "The truth about my parents being Dai smugglers who abandoned me in Yokoya. Rangi, you came in here with me knowing this." The words poured out of her in a churning waterfall. Her knee was jogging rapidly up and down. The motion did not escape Rangi's notice. "As bizarre as it was for me to say, your secret family history is not the issue," Rangi said. "Don't you think you played that situation a little aggressively?" That was news to Kyoshi, coming from her burn it first and ask questions later friend. "It's the kind of behavior these people respect," she said. "Tagaka knew we were calm and rational, and look what she tried to do to us." Rangi's teeth clicked. "You didn't see yourself back there. It was like you were begging them to attack you. There's being brave and then there's having a death wish." She reached out and clamped her hand on Kyoshi's leg to still the shaking. "We're not in our element," Rangi said. "You might have the keys to certain doors, but this is not our house. You have to be more careful. And if I back down from a few Dai, I have no chance of standing up to Zhang Shu." "I'm sorry, all right," Kyoshi said. This argument wasn't going to resolve anytime soon, and the gang was coming back. The last thing they needed was to show a fractured front to the criminals they were trying to coerce. Rangi let it go, seeing the same value in unity. The Siwong boy, Water Tribe woman, and bulky man arranged themselves in front of Kyoshi with great formality. She had often stood that way to greet important guests, always in the back of the group due to her height. The man made a gesture with one open palm down, and the other hand clenched into a fist on top. It was unlike any other greeting Kyoshi had witnessed and made, It seemed like this right side was smashing the left for trying to steal food off a table. Flitting sparrow keep Wong, he said, bowing slightly. He seemed embarrassed by having such a delicate-sounding nickname. He didn't show it. The lithe waterbender stepped forward and made the same pose, though in a slouchy way to let everyone know she thought the concept of professional names silly. Kirima, she said. Just Kirima. Pull it, Lek, the boy snapped with great pride. He had rearranged his head wraps behind his ears to move to a more dignified indoor style. But some call me Skullcrusher Lek, or Lek of the Whistling Death. Kyoshi made sure not to mirror the faces that Wong and Kirima made behind Lek's back, or the boy would certainly have been insulted. Kyoshi, she said. This is my associate, Rangi. Rangi made a little snort of disapproval that Kyoshi took to mean, oh, so we're giving them our real names now. How did you come to us tonight? Kirima asked. Start as far back as you can. That far, huh? I don't remember much from when I was little, Kyoshi said. Though her legs had settled down, the front of her neck now ached with tension. Only that my parents and I never stayed in one place very long, and they never told me where. You could say I grew up in the Earth Kingdom. That would have been before any of you joined, Lao Gi said to the others. Jessa and Hark slowed down considerably for several years and barely ran any jobs. They never told me why they stopped gathering the old crew for so long. I thought maybe they'd quit the game. The old man's memory helped Kyoshi fit pieces together into a completed puzzle. The result was uglier than she'd imagined. Well, they must have wanted back in very badly because they abandoned me in a farming village when I was 5 or 6, she said. I can't be sure exactly when. I never saw them after that, or forgave them. That can't be, Lex said. Jess and Hark would never do that to family. They were the most loyal bosses anyone could ask for. You must be mistaken. Kyoshi wondered what it would be like to pick him up, like she did to that pirate, and shake him until he saw spots. Kirima intervened before she could explore the idea. Are you telling their own daughter what happened to her? The waterbender snapped at Lek. Shut up and let her finish. There's not much more to tell, Kyoshi said. I nearly died of neglect in that village before I was taken in by the household of a rich and powerful man. A sage. The only possessions I had to my name were my mother's gear and her journal, which had information about my parents' Daofei customs obligations I could call on. It was an instruction manual, like you said. She glanced at Rangi. I kept my parents' past the secret from the village the whole time. Given how I was treated as an outsider, I don't think I would have fared well if the townfolk knew I was also the spawn of criminals. Rangi clenched her jaw. Kyoshi could tell she was thinking about the what-ifs, how their relationship might have been different had she known Kyoshi was a tainted child from the start. Would she have looked past that and befriended Kyoshi all the same? Or would she have condemned her to the rubbish heap like she'd done to Oma and Jay and the others? One day you just decided to leave and come here, Lex said. He was still incredulous, like a sequence of events that started with Kyoshi's parents being anything but perfect was not possible. I did not just decide, Kyoshi snarled, turning her attention back on him. The man whose house I lived in decided, when he murdered 2 people dear to me. I swore by the spirits that turned this world on its axis that I would make him pay for it. That's why I'm here, she said, pounding her fist on the table for emphasis. He's too powerful and influential to be brought down by the law, so I need the opposite side of the coin. I need my parents' resources. They can give me one gift at all in this life, then let it be revenge for those I've lost. Her face was red. Kyoshi felt ready to explode. She didn't know what she'd do if another door in the wall opened and her mother and father stepped out. It would have been as volatile and uncharted as her encounter with the cave spirit. Lex solemnly took his head wraps off and wrung them between his hands. His hair was sandy and cropped underneath. You came all this way to find Jessa and Hark, he said in a mournful mutter. Kyoshi, I'm so sorry. I don't know how to break this to you, but... Relief came like a monsoon. She did not have to meet them. She didn't have to discover what kind of person she was when the path unearthed itself and took solid form. What, are they dead or something? Kyoshi said, waving her hand at him flippantly. I don't care. A lie. Had they appeared in front of her, she might have had to run screaming from this room. Lex's grief was replaced by outrage. A funeral guest who caught her stealing the altar offerings. We're talking about your mother and father. They were taken by a fever 3 years ago. She found it so easy to be cruel now that she knew for certain they couldn't defend themselves. Wow, Kyoshi said. I guess there are some things you can't outrun, huh? His eyes goggled out of his head. How can you be so vile? No one in the Four Nations disrespect their own kin like that. They left me behind because I took up too much cargo space, Kyoshi said. So I would say it's a family tradition. She snapped the war fan closed, intending to puncture her sentence in an intimidating way. Instead, the arms fell out of alignment and the leaf folded the wrong way, ruining the effect. She would need to learn how to use it properly at some point. I'm not here to confront my parents or their ghosts, Kyoshi said. The raw nervous energy coursing through her bones had slowed. I'm here to seek what's owed me by blood ties. She counted off on her fingers. I want access to safe houses in bigger cities where I can stay hidden at length. I want introductions with the rest of the network, starting with the strongest benders. And most of all, I want training. Training until I'm strong enough to take down my enemy personally. Silence fell over the group. Kurima made an awkward little choke. Kyoshi thought maybe she'd gotten some saliva down the wrong pipe, but then the waterbender burst out laughing. Other cities, she guffawed. Let me guess. Your journal mentions secret bases in Ba Sing Se, Omashu, Gowling maybe, filled with a brotherhood of bandits who honor the old ways. I'll blow my trumpet, Wong said. I'm sure they'll come running. Kyoshi frowned. What's so funny? Kurima spread her arm. This is our one and only base of operations. This is the network, us. Whatever assistance you thought you could personally demand outside the law ends here, within these walls. Kyoshi remembered the most tired she'd ever been in her life. It was not long after she'd been dropped in Yokoya, when she still saw the journal and chest as her birthright treasures and not as incriminating evidence her parents wanted to ditch alongside her. She'd been chased away from every door, forced to drag her heavy trunk with her. It was a lot for a child to carry back then, even one as outsized as her. As the day wore on, the exhaustion had seeped into her fingernails and teeth. Her thoughts had turned grey. There had been no room in her body for hunger and thirst. It was all given over to fatigue. Kyoshi felt the same fragments of weariness threatening to undo her now. They drove into her joints like nails, beckoning her to give up. Looking at the Dao Fei before her, she saw it clearly now. They weren't the vanguard of some shadow army she could use to march upon Jiangsu. They were haggard, hunted people. Like her. We've fallen on hard times, Wong said. She gathered he didn't speak much, so when he did, it was likely true and to the point. Crackdowns on smuggling across the Earth Kingdom have been pretty severe in recent years. We've been cut off from gangs in other cities without much news or any jobs to speak of. Your journal must be at least a decade old with entries that go back further, Lex said. In those days, groups like ours had real influence. He stared at his hands like a deposed king longing for the grip of his scepter. We had territory. The governors asked us for permission to do business. Like you would have been 3 years old during our heyday, Kurima said. We hadn't even picked you up yet. He wheeled on her furiously. That means the rest of you should be more upset than me. We understand, Rangi interrupted. It's painful to know what should have been. Kyoshi detected a streak of satisfaction in her voice at the way things had turned out. The hole went no deeper than a dilapidated tea house and a few cut purses. As far as Rangi was concerned, they could still extricate themselves. Kyoshi, we tried, she said. You did what you could. But this isn't what we came for. She glanced at the room doors and their unusual placement. We could stay here overnight, perhaps, but it'd be no safer than camping. We should get back to Peng Peng and fly to the nearest. Lex slammed his hand on the table. Fly? His voice broke with excitement. You flew here? The rest of the group perked up. Are you telling me you have a sky bison? Kurima said. There was an interested gleam in her eye. Rangi cursed at her slip-up. Why? Kyoshi said. What difference would it make? Because now you have something we want, Kurima said while Lex bounced off the walls. Being Jester and Hark's kid means we're obligated to keep you safe from harm. Doesn't mean we'll follow your orders to help you on some personal quest for vengeance. You want that level of commitment, then you make us an offer. No, Rangi snapped. Forget it. We're not giving you our bison. We're not giving you anything of the sort. Simmer down, Topknot, Kurima said. I'm merely suggesting a partnership. We need to get out of this dried-up town to where the prospects are better. Kyoshi wants training. We should travel together for a while. It's her best shot at finding earthbending teachers of ill repute. Hearing her, Kyoshi suddenly realized she'd made a critical mistake. She'd shown her earthbending. While she greatly needed improvement in her native element, there wasn't a straightforward way to get training in the others without revealing she was the Avatar. Rangi was still opposed to the idea. We didn't come here to revive a 2-bit smuggling operation, she said to Kyoshi. We'd just be taking on more risk than we needed. First of all, our operation was top-notch, Lex said, full of umbrage. And second, you two are baggage here. You wouldn't last a day moving in our circles without a guide. Crying out loud, we almost killed you. Rangi narrowed her eyes. Is that your impression of what happened? She sounded perfectly willing to test his theory. Kyoshi buried her face in her hands while they argued. Ideas that had been so clear in her mind before were becoming trampled and muddy. Her singular path turned out to be full of brambles and false turns. Laogi interrupted her wallowing by slamming an empty bottle on the table. He'd been forgotten until now, and his smile folded in on itself like he was bursting with the world's best secret. I know it's a tough decision, my dear girl, he said, cocking his ear toward the door. But don't take too long. The police are coming. Escape. The sound of marching boots hitting the road filled the air. You stupid old man, Lex shouted. I'm never putting you on watch again. Finally, Laogi said. He winked at Kyoshi. Officers wearing constably green hustled into the tea house. They fanned out along the sides to accommodate their numbers, reaching to the corners. 20 or so wearing quilted armor with single Dao broadswords on their backs. At the head of their formations, still in plain clothes, but now wearing the same headband adorned with the prefectural badge of the law as the others, were the same 3 men who'd been in the tea house earlier. Remind me again who's good at spotting undercovers, Lek? Karima snarled. In a moment of panic, Kyoshi thought the officer had come for her on behalf of Zhang Shu, but that couldn't have been the case. If he'd sent out messengers immediately, they still wouldn't have beaten the bison. No, she thought with a grimace. They were here for the girl who'd walked into an outlaw hideout and started making demands with outlaw codes. She'd incriminated herself in public like a fool. In the name of Governor Deng, you are under arrest, the captain said. Instead of a sword, he pointed a ceremonial truncheon topped with the Earth Kingdom's seal at them, but it looked heavy enough to break bones regardless. Put down your weapons. Deng. The name brought more terror to Kyoshi's heart than a charging saber-toothed moose lion. Stout, red-nosed Governor Deng was a frequent visitor to Zhang Shu's house, and one of his closest allies. Kyoshi glanced at Rangi. The firebender's worried headshake confirmed her fear. If they got caught here tonight, the whole operation was over. They'd be back in Zhang Shu's grasp before breakfast got cold. The captain did not like the eye contact between her and Rangi. I said, put down your weapons, he shouted, bristling for a fight. The Dao Fei looked at their empty hands in confusion. Kyoshi realized that unless the man felt particularly threatened by Laogi's bottles, the only armed one was she. The glinting war fan was still in her hand, its mate stuck in her belt. She stood up so that she could have room to yank the other fan out. The captain took a step back in astonishment. He'd interpreted her unfurling to her full height as a hostile act. He wasn't the first. Take them, he shouted to his men. There were so many of them. Crammed in the dark confines of the tea house, the police force seemed larger in number than Tagaka's marauders. 5 of the officers made a beeline for Kyoshi, the obvious target. They were knocked down by a blast of fire. Kyoshi glanced back at Rangi again. She had her fist extended, her skin smoking. Her face was upset but unrepentant. If they were in full measure. Rangi didn't do things by halves. Inspired by her decisiveness, Wong picked up Laogi and threw the drunken bodily at the captain like a rag doll. Laogi's warlike screech as he flew through the air was the only sign that he'd agreed to the act. The 2 of them must have done it before. The element of surprise worked strongly in their favor as Laogi's wiry arms wrapped around the captain's neck and his legs scissored around the waist of his subordinate, becoming a human net. Another blast of Rangi sizzled past Kyoshi's ear. She no longer knew what was going on. Men closed in on her with swords drawn. She picked up the nearest, heaviest object, the pie showboard, by one of its legs and swung it in an arc. The policemen were bowled over like wheat stalks by the dense wooden bludgeon. The ones who tried to block her wild strikes with their Dao had their swords bent and crushed against their torsos for their trouble. Fresh officers ran in through the door only to slip on a sheet of ice that Karima laid down using nothing but the remaining wine from Laogi's stash. Kyoshi jolted in surprise at the reserved, minimalist twirl of her wrists and fingers. For a moment, it looked like Tagaka of the Fifth Nation was fighting on her side. Girl, Laogi said, clamping swords inside their scabbards whenever his bony fingers and toes could reach. Bump the table. She didn't have the same previous working relationship with him as Wong, but Kyoshi caught his drift. She raised her foot high and stomped the floor. The tea house jumped into the air again, this time tilted higher from the back. Lao Gi and several of the policemen fell through the door. The others were knocked prone, scrambling on the straw and frozen wine. Kyoshi's new compatriots managed to stay upright, having seen the trick before. Out the other side, Lek yelled. What about Lao Gi? She hadn't meant to dump him into the thick of the enemy. He can handle himself, move! She flung the pie show board at the nearest officers and followed the others through the kitchen. It was empty, just a little room with a clay stove that smouldered from the one attempt Lek had made at tea. Another door gave way, and they were in the town square behind the building. The passage had been disguised, painted over without a frame, and there were no windows, so it was the side of the house that was the least well guarded by the police. Only 2 men held positions there. Kyoshi heard a zip-zip noise, and they crumbled to the ground before they could wave their swords. Lek tucked something back into his pocket. Where's your ride? Rangi answered, which was good, because Kyoshi had lost her bearings and had no idea. Southwest corner of town, she said. If everyone follows me, I can get us there. There was a harsh scrape of clay from above. A whole section of roof tiles sloughed off and came crashing down at their heels as they ran. Reaching Peng Peng meant running along the edge of the square, seeking out outlet from many cramped alleyways branching and forking in different directions like the veins of a leaf. Kyoshi caught sight of the reason why they hadn't been swarmed by more lawmen. Lao Gi was tangling with a whole platoon of them by the main entrance. They slashed wildly at the air he occupied, only to come up empty every time. He folded and rolled his body like wine still fogged his mind, dodging and flipping, his moving seemingly designed to taunt and frustrate them. Kyoshi saw him leaning over at impossible angles nearly parallel to the ground, and realized he was subtly earthbending supports underneath his torso, changing his center of gravity to confound his opponents. We can't leave him, she shouted to the others. Apparently they could, because no one else gave Lao Gi a second thought. This one, Rangi said, darting down a passage into the darkness. But before anyone had a chance to follow, a thick stone wall shot up from the ground, reaching the height of the neighboring roofs, closing the exit off. The police force had brought earthbenders of their own. Lek kept running after her as if he were oblivious to the obstacle in his path. Kyoshi thought he was going to dash his brains out against the wall. And then he did one of the most amazing things she had ever seen. He stepped up into the thin air. Lek ran higher and higher on the invisible stairs. It was only after he'd gone above eye level that she saw how. The thinnest columns of earth she'd seen anyone earthbend shot up from the ground with each of his steps, anticipating where his foot would land next. They provided a moment's support and then crumbled into dust immediately once his weight shifted off them. His rising path left no trace behind him. Kyoshi had watched children around the village play by bending the ground they stood on into the air. It was sometimes a test of courage, who could make their pillar the highest, or a game of coordination, taking turns with a partner to seesaw back and forth. But it was always highly destructive to the ground, leaving jagged markers of what had happened, and the players had to remain still, or they'd fall off their platforms. Lek had none of those concerns. He floated, weightless, free of the earth's pull. He stepped over the top of the wall and onto the rooftop before disappearing. The feat wasn't limited to earthbenders. Karima uncorked a small pouch at her waist and wisps of water spilled forth, gathering under her feet. She stepped higher into nothingness much as Lek had, only her stairs were powerful, thin little jets that provided the same resistance as Earth. If the timing was more difficult for her, or the water less stable, she compensated with supreme grace. Wong glanced at Kyoshi as if to check what she was thinking. You can't possibly, was what? He shrugged at her skepticism and followed his teammate skyward, using earth and dust as Lek had, like it was no big deal. The sight of the gigantic man defying all notions of gravity made her jaw drop. It looked less like bending and more like spiritual shigansery, an invisible hawk lifting Wong's bulk over the roofline. Kyoshi watched him and Karima run over eaves and windowsills and the blank spaces of alley gaps with equal ease. The whole show had happened in less than seconds. It was a mind-blowing stunt and highly unfortunate, because no one had taken into consideration that Kyoshi could not do that. She expressly, with utmost certainty, could not do that. Cut her off, a policeman shouted behind her. A second slab of rock shot up to her right. Left, then. She sprinted for the nearest remaining avenue and made it out of the square before it was blocked shut. Immediately, she knew it was a mistake. The alley veered sharply away from the direction the others had gone. The forks in the narrowing street had no markers, and each subsequent guess she made only got her more lost. The houses squeezed in on her as she ran, promising to throttle her by the gills like a fish in a net. A blast of flame shot into the darkening sky, and then another, the source slightly to the right. Rangi was signaling her where to go. Kyoshi felt her heart skip a beat for her friend. It was either that or a conniption from running at full speed for so long. She followed the upcoming bend in the direction of the fire, but so did the lawmen. In fact, they used their knowledge of the town layout to seal a march on her, suddenly popping into view closer behind her. She couldn't double back, and up ahead a dead end loomed. The alley had been walled up with bricks. "No way out, girl," an officer with admiral lung capacity bellowed. "Step," she thought to herself. "Do the thing like they did." Her self-berating voice sounded a lot like Rangi in her head. "Should be easier with more speed, right?" She hurled herself toward the wall, praying that she could avatar herself into picking up a technique she'd only seen once. Her on-the-run attempt to bend the necessary struts without destroying the whole town resulted in only pitiful bumps of earth appearing before her. They collapsed under her weight, tripping her up. She fell forward uncontrollably, face first. She wasn't able to cross her arms in front of her before she made impact. Kyoshi shut her eyes as she slammed into the wall. There was a terrible crash, an explosion of snapping bricks and tearing mortar. Then she opened them again. She was on the other side, still running. She'd plowed straight through without feeling a thing. She must have bent reflexively, flinched and wrapped herself in her own power like a cloak. A quick glance back showed a Kyoshi-sized hole in the wall and surprised guards trying to decide whether to leap through or go over the top. In her distraction, she collided with the corner of a house. Fear of broken bones caused her to force her way through the clay structure the instant she felt the pain of impact on her shoulder. The building stayed standing, and each chunk of it ripped off like a sample loaf of bread. Ahead of her, the spaces between closed-up merchant shops were so narrow that a person smaller than her would have had to stop and wedge through sideways. Rangi sent up another beacon. The only way to get there was as the bird flew. Kyoshi sent an apology into the cosmos for the damage she was about to cause and barreled straight into the cluster of buildings. If she couldn't be a creature of grace, then she'd be a battering ram. She smashed through the first wall like it was rice paper. Inside, she crossed the floor in a few steps and burst into the neighboring section, boring a passageway through the cluster of storerooms. Each section she stampeded through offered a momentary glimpse of different merchandise. Dry goods, wet goods, weapons, ivory that was certainly illegal, fancy hats. She was glad that she was only ruining inventory and not harming living occupants with flying debris. Her face felt tight, and she wondered if she'd injured herself, ripped her skin open. But no, she determined. She was grinning with a locked, maddened expression, mindlessly exulting in her own power and destruction. Once she realized it, she quickly worked her jaw back into a grim frown and splashed through the next wall. An unfamiliar sensation caused her to flail after hitting the last barrier. It was freedom. She was in a broad street, going the right way for once. Up above her on the rooftops, the whole crew sprang deftly from surface to surface, bolstering themselves with their element when necessary. "I see you made your own shortcut," Karima shouted. The water lifting her up sparkled prettily in the moonlight, making her look like a lunar fairy. Kyoshi checked behind her to see if anyone had followed the trail of utter devastation she'd left through the town. "Where's Rangi?" "Still in the lead. It's quite a companion you've got." There was another blaze of light that resembled a rocket climbing into the night. Rangi had joined the Dao Fei on their level. She ran as nimbly as they did on the roof tiles, and when there was a leap too great to make naturally, she stepped on jets of fire that blasted out of her feet, bounding in propulsive arcs across the sky. The sight made Kyoshi's breath come to a standstill at the very time she needed it flowing. Rangi was so beautiful, illuminated by moon and fire that it hurt. She was strength and skill and determination wrapped around an unshakable heart. Kyoshi had always admired Rangi, but right now, it felt as if she were gazing at her friend through a pane of glass freshly cleaned. Some mighty and loving spirit had reached down from the heavens and outlined the firebender in new strokes of color and vibrance. There was a struggle in Kyoshi's chest that had nothing to do with how hard she was running. Notes of longing and fear played in one chord. She tamped the feeling down, not wanting to confront what it meant right now. In any case, it was a poor time to be distracted. Soon they exhausted their supply of houses to leap over. They reached the shanties in the outskirts, causing more confusion for the residents who'd seen Kyoshi and Rangi head inward for the night, but now flee for their lives in the opposite direction with 3 other people in tow. Lek raced for the copse of trees without being told, perhaps understanding that there were only a few places you could hide a 10-ton bison. Kyoshi reached the copse in time to catch the boy as Peng Peng roared and blasted him backward with wind. "Easy, girl," she coughed, her lungs burning from the run and inhaled building dust. "They're with us." Walking across the sky must have been a highly efficient technique, because no one else seemed as tired as she. Rangi leaped onto Peng Peng's neck and unwound the reins from the saddle horn. The Dao Fei climbed onto the bison's back, gripping her fur with strange familiarity. Once they were settled, Rangi took Peng Peng up above the tree line. Lek was ecstatic. "A bison!" he screamed, drumming on the saddle floor. "A real bison!" "Calm down," Rangi said. "It's not like you can't see them near any air temple." "He's just excited because we used to have one of our own," Wong said. "Cute little fella named Longyan." Despite their need to move quickly, Rangi paused, leaving Peng Peng swooping around in a gentle, idling circle. "Wait, how?" she said. "Only air nomads can tame bison. The animals won't listen to strangers if they're stolen." "We didn't steal Longyan," Karima said. "He was Jess's bison." Rangi squinted in confusion and turned to Kyoshi. "But wasn't Jessa your mother?" Kyoshi winced. She spotted a reprieve from the awkward conversation, albeit only a temporary one. On the ground below them, waving his hand, was Lao Gi. He'd managed to escape the dozens of men who had him surrounded and made it into the hiding spot in better time than anyone else. The Dao Fei didn't look one bit surprised to see him. Rangi took Peng Peng low and Wong leaned over, clasping hands with Lao Gi and swinging him onto the saddle, again with the smooth ease of practice. "I thought we might finally be rid of your stinking hide," Lek yelled. "Not quite so easy," Lao Gi said. "Is anyone else thirsty? I could use—" "Shut up," Rangi snapped. She fixed Kyoshi with her gaze again. "Does that mean what I think it means? About your mother?" She looked hurt at another secret being kept from her. But Kyoshi had honestly, sincerely forgotten to bring it up. It hadn't been relevant until now. "Yes," Kyoshi said sheepishly. "My mother was an airbender. I am half air nomad." She felt terribly guilty. She'd forced Rangi to absorb a lot in the past day. Finding out that Kyoshi wasn't fully the Earth Kingdom girl that Rangi had assumed this whole time was yet another small weight added to the pile. But hearing that a despicable criminal and gang boss was an air nomad would have been enough to shock and confuse anyone. People around the world looked up to airbenders as enlightened paragons who were free of worldly concerns. They belonged to a benign, peaceful monastic culture that was so spiritually pure that every single member had bending ability. Rangi resembled a child who'd just been told that the sweets tucked underneath her pillow had been left by her parents instead of the great harvest spirit. Karima and Wong detected the awkwardness between them and remained silent. Lek wasn't so observant. "What's everyone looking sour for?" he said, slapping Rangi and Kyoshi on their backs. "We finally have a bison again! Our best days are ahead of us!" He thrust his fist into the air and let out a whoop. "The Flying Opera Company is back in business!" They camped along the bank of a dried-up creek, hiding themselves by virtue of being way out in the middle of nowhere. If the officers in Chameleon Bay knew what direction they'd gone in, it still would have taken at least a day by ostrich horse to catch up. They didn't bother hiding the fire Rangi blasted into the ground for them. It burned larger than they needed, sputtering and cracking from unseasoned fuel. They ate the last of their dried food. Karima and Wong fell asleep first without asking about shifts. Lek waded in the waterless creek, picking up a few polished stones that caught his fancy before he settled in for the night. Rangi was holding a grudge over how badly the day's events had gone, almost getting arrested by the local police, the Dao Fei insinuating themselves into their camp, the revelations about Kyoshi's heritage. So the two of them engaged in a silent, petty contest of wills to see who would fall asleep next. Kyoshi had the advantage, knowing that there was probably a nightmare waiting for her. She made sure Rangi was truly out cold before laying the good blanket they'd kept hidden from the others over the firebender's shoulders. Kyoshi walked along the river, wobbling over pavestone-sized rocks that had once been underwater, until she found Lao Gi sitting under a gnarled tree. Half its roots had been washed clean in some long-ago flash flood, while the rest clung tightly to the bank. The tree's efforts were in vain. It was dying. Lao Gi's eyes were closed in meditation. "You're very loud," he said. She frowned. She'd practiced stepping lightly for years as a servant, to move like a whisper so as not to distract guests. "I mean your spirit is loud," the old man said. "It rings in the air. Sometimes it screams. Like right now. Your body may be all the way over there, but your spirit is grabbing me by the shoulders and howling in my face. If you went to the spirit world in your current condition, you'd cause a typhoon the size of Ba Sing Se. I know who you are, Kyoshi said. It took me a while to figure it out, but after seeing you fight so many men at once, it was clear. He opened one eye a crack. Kyoshi had a theory that people who like meditating practice that gesture to look good-humored and wise. You're Tai Guai, the immortal, Kyoshi said. Oh? Lao Gi said, fully interested now. I suppose there was a description of me in Justice Journal? Long white hair, great dancer, devastatingly handsome. It didn't have that much detail. It said you were an underworld legend rumored to be 200 years old. But that's obviously a tall tale. Of course. I'm a man, not a spirit, after all. I know it's you because of a different description, Kyoshi said. Tai Guai fights with a crutch. I was looking for someone with a wooden crutch or a bad leg. Then I saw you leaning on your earthbending while you fought the lawman in the square. Lao Gi sighed, as if he'd pitied her for putting two and two together. He put his hands on his knees and raised himself to his feet. Then he tiptoed down the web of roots until he was in Kyoshi's face. Why would one such as yourself seek out immortal Tai Guai? He said, no longer an old man, but a human-headed monster asking a riddle in exchange for safe passage. After all, your mother never did. She only called me Lao Gi. The root he perched on shouldn't have been able to support a bird, let alone a human being. Kyoshi swallowed hard. She had a sense of tumbling downhill, her inner ears roiling like choppy seas, an inability to go back to the harbor. Because she was afraid of you, Kyoshi said. She didn't know when you first joined the group, but her suspicions grew over time that you were Tai Guai the assassin. Tai Guai, who killed the 40th Earth King. She figured that you were using a smuggling gang as cover, to travel from place to place as you eliminated targets for your own purposes. She was too scared to confront you. The entries in her mother's hand had been completely fearless while describing dangerous smuggling jobs, burglaries, and skirmishes with local militias. They were the musings of someone who'd thrilled to the life of Dao Fei. The journal also had patches that were ripe with criminal superstition, none more so than the scattered stories about a shadow who moved across the Earth Kingdom, snuffing out lives both exalted and lowly according to some unknowable design. Jessa the smuggler had pieced together the pattern. Whenever the silly old man and her gang slipped away by himself, a death would happen nearby. Sometimes it would be a prominent noble who should have been safe behind thick walls and numerous guards. Lao Gi, the name had struck hard, lowered his head and mouthed a quick prayer for the dead. That woman always was very observant. I'm surprised I didn't catch her catching me. So what is it that her daughter wants? To bring me to justice? No, Kyoshi said. I want you to teach me how to kill someone. If Lao Gi was surprised by her answer, he didn't show it. Hit them in the head really hard with a rock. No, Kyoshi repeated. Bending and killing are not the same thing. The image raced through her mind, the way Jiang Shu had so casually done the unspeakable, first to Yun and then to Kelsang, as easy as breathing. It needed to be that easy for her. She could afford no mental block, no hesitation when it came to taking his life. She had to be ready in all regards when she next saw Jiang Shu. A breeze in the night air plucked at her skin. You should go to sleep, girl, Lao Gi said, because you've already learned lesson 1. So does that mean we'll continue later? She decided to test the waters. Sifu? If and when I believe the time is right. She bowed and left into his meditations, backing away out of distrust as much as respect. Her footing was unsteady and threatened to roll her ankles. Right before she was about to turn, Lao Gi spoke up again. I'd appreciate it if you didn't tell the others about my independent ventures, he said. I don't wish to complicate matters with our little merry band. The relationship between Lao Gi and the other Dao Fei was not her problem. If that was the only leverage she had in order to get him to teach her, she'd use it. I wouldn't dream of it, Sifu. Lao Gi smiled benignly. It reminded her of Jiang Shu's, only more genuine. It reached his eyes. He had no need to hide what he was from her. And in return, I'll keep your secret, he said. Kyoshi. The agreement. Kyoshi slept poorly, fretting during the night over what the old man had said. Her secret. First Dagaka and now Lao Gi. If every old person could look into her eyes and deduce she had unusual power or was the avatar, then she'd be in trouble. The only benders she'd be able to learn from would be infants like Lek. A toe in her ribs woke her. She clawed at the hard surface under her, dirt filling her fingers instead of her sheets. She found herself blearily missing her bed. "Get up," Rangi said. The sun hadn't risen yet, and the fire still had a few red embers glowing in it. Lao Gi was nowhere to be seen, and the others were engrossed in a three-way snoring contest. Grey pre-dawn light made the dusty riverbank appear like it had been treated with lye, leached of colour and vitality. Kyoshi staggered to her feet. Having moved in the night, the good blanket fell off her onto the ground. "What?" Rangi shoved her along the bank, in the opposite direction she'd taken last night. "You wanted training? Well, you're getting training. Starting today. Now." They walked, Kyoshi feeling like a prisoner as Rangi prodded her sharply every so often for not moving fast enough. They put some distance between themselves and the camp, but much less than Kyoshi thought they would by the time Rangi ordered her to stop. A series of grassy mounds shielded them from view of the others, but the small hills weren't very high. "Let's see your horse stance," Rangi said. "You don't get a pass on the basics that earthbending has in common with firebending." "We're firebending here?" Anyone who came searching for them would certainly check this place. They'd left Peng Peng alone with criminals who coveted her. "We're reviewing basics, not making flame," Rangi said. "I doubt you need a lot of nuanced high-level instruction at this point. Can you even hold a deep bending stance for 10 minutes? 10 minutes! Kyoshi had heard fired was an admirable goal, one that she'd never reach. There was a hint of a smirk on Rangi's lips. "Horse stance, now. I don't say things to my students twice." 3 minutes in, and Kyoshi knew what this was. Punishment. The burning in her thighs and back, the ache in her knees, was retribution for not telling Rangi everything. "Look, I'm sorry," she said. Rangi rested her elbow in her other hand and examined her nails. "You're allowed to talk once your hips get to parallel." Kyoshi swore and readjusted her bones. This had to be an exercise meant for short people. "I should have told you my mother was an airbender. I didn't think it was relevant." Rangi seemed satisfied with the apology, or the amount of pain she was inflicting on Kyoshi. "It is relevant," she said. "Air nomads aren't outlaws. This is like finding out you had a second head hidden under your robes the whole while." Maybe satisfying Rangi's curiosity would get her out of horse stance early. "My mother was a nun born in the Eastern Air Temple," Kyoshi said. "I don't know much about her early life other than she became a master at a young age and was highly regarded. Talking provided a useful distraction from the acid eating her muscles. Then, on a journey through the Earth Kingdom, she met my father in a small town somewhere. He was the Dao Fei, an earthbender and small-time thief." "Oh, I can already see where this is going," Rangi said. "Yes. He dragged her into a scheme, and she fell in love with both him and the life of an outlaw. She must have been born into the wrong existence as an air nomad, because she tattooed over her arrows with serpents and dove into the underworld with her whole being, seeking out more adventure." Rangi shook her head, still not able to get over an airbender going rogue. "That's just so bizarre. You heard the others talk about her. She became a relatively big figure among Dao Fei, more so than my father, but her airbending suffered from a spiritual taint, or so her journal says. Letting herself be absorbed by worldly concerns, and greedy ones at that, caused her power to dwindle. So she compensated. With a set of fans," Rangi said, snapping her fingers at a mystery solved. "For the life of me, I couldn't figure out why you had fans as an earthbender. I didn't ask because I thought it might have been a touchy subject." "It is." The searing pain in her legs had been replaced by a duller, more manageable agony. "Why do you think I never told Kelsang? Oh, by the way, I'm the product of one of the worst disgraces to your culture in recent memory. By the time I was old enough to consider bringing it up, there was no point. I had my job. I'd met you." 5 minutes, Rangi said. "Not bad." Kyoshi pushed the hurt to the back of her mind. "I think I can keep going." Rangi took a lap around her, checking her posture from all angles. "It's galling. A master airbender abandoning her spirituality for a lowlife. No offense. None taken. Doesn't sit well with me either." Rangi poked her in the small of the back. "Promise me you'll never throw your life away over a boy," she said, her voice coated thickly with disdain. Kyoshi laughed. "I won't. Besides, who could possibly be worth—" The full weight of what she was saying slammed down on her mid-sentence like a heavy gate, her insides balled with disgust at her own weakness. She let herself laugh. She'd spoken Kelsang's name out loud without cursing Zhang Shu's in the same breath. And worst of all, she'd forgotten Yoon. It didn't matter how long the lapse was. To release her grip on him, even for a second, was unforgivable. Rangi knew it too. Her face crumpled and she turned away. Kyoshi remembered what Lao Gi had said about her spirit making too much noise. Seeing Rangi stilled with grief in front of her drove the lesson home. The two of them held storms inside. Kyoshi had to be stronger, in body and mind. Moments of happiness were like useful proofing, liquid testing the cracks in a jar. The less they occurred, the greater the chance she was on the right track for vengeance. She was still in a low stance. She remembered the ineffectual fire fist she'd thrown at Zhang Shu's face. Perhaps if she'd embraced her firebending ability earlier, she could have ended him right there and then. "Let me try producing flame," Kyoshi said. Rangi looked up and frowned. Kyoshi's rededication to her cause felt hot and bitter inside her, like steam in a plugged tea kettle. She was sure that if she let it out, she could firebend. "Fire fists," she said. "I think I can do them with real flame now. I feel like it'll work." "No," Rangi said. "No?" Kyoshi was taken aback by her certainty. Firebending felt so real, so close. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, no. You're as tense as a rolled-up armadillo lion right now. You're going to produce the wrong kind of flame and develop bad habits. Watch." Rangi stepped to the side. Without warning, she dropped into her stance and punched the air, snapping her sleeves with the force of her motion. Kyoshi could see her knuckles smolder like the tip of an incense stick. "You need to work on relaxation and mental coordination first," Rangi said. "Early lessons in firebending are all about suppressing flame and keeping it controlled. For a beginner, making visible fire means failure." Kyoshi scoffed to herself. Not producing flame had been the cause of her problems from the start. "Then let me try what you did." She planted her feet in mimicry of Rangi and chambered her fists. "Kyoshi, don't!" She imagined Zhang Shu's face, inhaled, and struck. Her one experience at flame spitting had jiggled something loose, made it easier for her breath to spiral outward from her lungs and combust. Too easy. Energy raced down her arm and crashed into her fingers. It caused her nerves to light up with signals as if she'd gripped a red-hot coal straight from the stove. Instead of the crisp glow that Rangi produced, the heat that came out of Kyoshi's fist was erratic, toggling. The popping of water added to hot oil. It went on for far too long and caused far too much pain. Kyoshi fell on her back and tried to get herself pointed away from any target. She managed to aim her hand at the sky in time. A tiny, contorted spout of black smoke belched upward from her fingers. Kyoshi sat up. Rangi watched the pathetic yarn ball of vapor climb into the air, and she gave Kyoshi a stare that was hard enough to flatten iron. They were saved from a difficult conversation by Lek. He crested the hill next to them and traced the path of the smoke with his finger. "What kind of broken-down firebending was that?" he said with a snicker. He directed the question at Rangi, not having seen the source. Rangi crossed her arms. "I had a momentary collapse of discipline," she said, still glaring at Kyoshi. "It won't happen again, not if I ever want to firebend properly." Lek shrugged. "Lighten up. I was just asking. If the two of you are done collapsing, breakfast is ready." Breakfast was some manner of rodent, hunted, gutted, skinned, and burnt to the point of unrecognizability. Kyoshi and Rangi ate with big, angry bites as they sat with the Dao Fei around the rebuilt fire, each trying to show the other how upset they were through aggressive gnawing. Lek forgot his portion as he watched them, amazed. "I didn't think an army princess and a servant girl from a fancy mansion would take to elephant rat." "Surviving training at the academy," Rangi said, breaking a bone with her fingers to get at the marrow. "We learned to accept whatever food we could find in the wild." "I used to eat garbage," Kyoshi said. That drew stares from the group. "I thought Jester and Hark left you in a farming village," Karima said. "That doesn't mean the farmer shared food with me." Kyoshi worked her tongue around a stringy fiber of meat caught in her teeth. "You might not have known I was a child of outlaws, but I was still an outcast there. They treated me like I was unclean. And then I had to do things like this to survive, so, self-fulfilling prophecy." "Reasons like that are why I can't stand law-abiding, salt-of-the-earth folk," Wong said. "It's the holier-than-thou attitude, the hypocrisy." He wiped his hands on a leaf. "If anything, they deserve to be knocked out and robbed on a regular basis." He noticed Kyoshi staring at him. "What?" he said. "I practice what I preach." "You must have hated their guts," Karima said. "The villagers? Not really." Kyoshi found she meant it. "Not as much as the people who left me with them." Lek threw the remnants of his meal into the fire and walked off, fuming silently. He disappeared behind the other side of Peng Peng, the only member of the party who seemed to make him happy. All right, what's his problem? Kyoshi snapped. Every time I state a fact or an opinion about my parents, he has a fit. That's because he idolized them, Karima said. We picked him up in a town outside the Misty Palms oasis. He just lost his brother, his last remaining family. Hark and Jessa took him in for a few days, and he proved useful on the job. So they taught him more and more of the trade until he grew into a stricter follower of the outlaw code than the rest of us. He worshipped the ground they walked on. Perhaps Karima had meant to soothe the beast inside Kyoshi, but instead she'd smeared its nose with fresh blood. Oh, I'm sorry, Kyoshi said, a lifetime's worth of unused irony pouring forth. I'll remember to be nicer to the boy my mother and father decided to raise instead of me. Karima made a gesture with her thumbs to indicate how little she cared about the issue. What about you? She said to Rangi. What's a sparky young noble like you doing with an earth peasant? The mere reminder of her duty caused Rangi to sit up straighter. I'm honor bound to follow and protect Kyoshi. Nope, Karima said, regretting she'd asked. Gonna cut you off right there. Last time I listened to a firebender talk about honor, my ears nearly rotted off my skull. Had to kick him out of my bed with both feet. She and Wong got up. The two older Dao Fei didn't feel the need to reciprocate with their life stories. Wong pointed 2 fingers at the campfire and sunk it a few feet into the ground before covering it up. His size belied the dexterity of his earthbending. In fact, she'd confirmed last night that every member of her parents' gang had finesse to spare, the exact quality she was lacking. We need to talk, Kyoshi said, getting up as well. Last night we were interrupted before I agreed to anything. Oh, come on, really? Karima said. After what we've been through, you want to take your bison and ditch us in the middle of nowhere? We shared a meal, Wong said, looking genuinely hurt. We beat up lawmen together. My demands haven't changed, Kyoshi said. I want bending training, and the only benders around are you lot. You'll teach me, personally. What are you lumping me in for, Earth Girl? Karima said. You want to learn water bending forms to relax and improve your circulation? Kyoshi prepared an answer overnight for this purpose. Wisdom can be gleaned from every nation, she said, using a quote of Kelsang's. If learning about the other elements can make me stronger, then I'll do it. That desperate for revenge, huh? Karima said. Who is this powerful man who's wronged you? You never told us his name. That's because you don't need to know. Kyoshi didn't want to talk about Zhang Shu. He was too renowned throughout the Earth Kingdom. The same went for her identity as the Avatar. Information about their link had spread, giving him a trail to hunt her down before she was ready to fight him. Every edge would count in this battle. Kyoshi recalled the way her parents' gang had flown over the rooftops last night unimpeded. They'd practically reached the same heights Zhang Shu had with his stone bridges. I want to learn how to run across the sky, she said, like you did in town. Dust stepping? Wong said. His usually impassive face took an edge of seriousness. It's our group's signature technique, Karima said. Though for me, it's misstepping, and it's not something you get for free. The atmosphere had changed. Previously, the Dao Fei had treated Kyoshi's demands as amusing, the barking of a puppy trying to look fierce. This was the first time they'd gotten truly cautious and guarded, and as if they might be swindled in the trade. Rangi noticed the reservations. You're acting pretty serious about a technique I cribbed after seeing it once, she said. Karima fixed her with a stare. Other groups probably would have killed you for that, she said without a hint of jest. You don't last long in our world by letting everyone see your advantages. Secrets are how we survive. She turned back to Kyoshi. We teach you, that means you're in. For real and for life. You have to swear our oaths and follow our codes. In the eyes of those who abide by the law, you'd be a Dao Fei. I'd be like Tagaka, Kyoshi thought. I'd be like my parents. She stilled the revulsion inside her and nodded. I understand. Kyoshi, think about what you're doing, Rangi yelled. Top knot's right for once, Wong said. You don't take these vows lightly. It means accepting us as your brothers and sisters. He raised his brows, showing the whites of his eyes. Since we've met, you've been looking down your nose at us. Can your honor take the hit, associating with such unclean folk? The big man was more incisive than he looked. Kyoshi knew what it was like, being on the receiving end of disdain. Her answer was yes. As far as she was concerned, her personal honor and reputation had no value. Trading them for more power was an easy choice. She would do it, for Kelsang and Yun. She could practically feel Rangi's disappointment vibrating through the ground. What are these oaths? Kyoshi asked. According to Karima, the swearing-in ceremony was supposed to take place in a grand hall, with the initiates standing under an arch of swords and spears. They'd have to improvise. Kyoshi took a spot by the riverbank while Wong stood behind her and held a pocket knife over her head. Karima had Kyoshi make the same odd salute the gang had used the night before in the tea house. The flattened left hand represented the square folk, the law-abiding community, while the right fist hammering it down represented followers of the outlaw code, just in case Kyoshi forgot she was joining the forces of darkness. Rangi stalked some ways off to the side, making sure to stay within their field of vision so everyone could see how angry and disapproving she was the whole time. Karima ignored her while conducting the ceremony. According to the waterbender, there were normally 54 oaths that had to be taken, recited from memory by the new member of the gang. She decided to let Kyoshi off easy with just the most important 3. "O spirits," Karima exclaimed, "a lost one comes to us, seeking the embrace of family. But how will we know her heart is true? How will we know that she follows the code?" "I shall swear these oaths," Kyoshi said in response. "I swear to defend my brothers and sisters and obey the commands of my elders. Their kin will be my kin, their blood my blood. Should I fail to uphold this vow, may I be hacked to death by many knives." The words were easy to say. They caused no tugs of conflict on her spirit. Yoon and Kelsang had been her lifeblood. She should have defended them with every scrap of her being. They might have lived had she embraced her power more fully. "Next," Kyoshi said, "I swear to follow no ruler and be beholden to no law. Should I become the lackey of any crown or country, may I be ripped apart by thunderbolts." As a good citizen of the Earth Kingdom, this line made her a little more nervous. Yoon had always said that Avatar had to act independently of the 4 nations, but to disregard law and order entirely felt like an extreme for the sake of extremes. Did her parents walk down the street trying to flaunt every statute and custom they could think of? "Stop drifting," Karima hissed. Kyoshi coughed and straightened up. "Last, I swear never to make an honest living from those who abide the law. I will take no legitimate wage and work for no legitimate man. Should I ever accept coin for my labors, may I be sliced to bits by a variety of knives." She didn't see the difference between the first and third punishments, and the last oath was perhaps the one most inimical to her being. Back in Yokoya, a steady job had been the only barrier between her and death. "I'm not that person anymore," Kyoshi reminded herself. "That girl is gone and will never come back." With her third vow, she was done. "I see no stranger before me, but a sister," Karima said. "The spirits have borne witness. Let our family prosper in the days to come." She saluted Kyoshi and stepped back. A heavy weight slammed down on Kyoshi's collarbones, and she momentarily panicked, fearing an attack from behind. The sensation was too similar to the rock that Jiang Shu had locked around her wrists. But it was just Wong giving her a congratulatory pat on the shoulders. "Welcome to the other side," he said, unsmiling. He brushed past her like they'd finished rearranging furniture and joined Karima in trudging back to the campsite. Kyoshi blinked. "That's it? What happens now?" "What happens is we leave this place on your bison," Karima said without looking back at her. "As soon as we can." They left her alone with Rangi. Instead of scolding Kyoshi, the firebender simply gave her a shrug that said, "You get what you pay for." Karima and Wong were already cleaning up the remnants of camp once they caught up. The big man took special care to cover their footprints, sweeping dust over the signs of their presence with little pivots of earthbending. "The deal was for lessons," Kyoshi said. "And you'll get them once we pick up a score," Karima said. She checked the level of her water pouch and made a face. "Even little baby vengeance seekers need food and money to survive. In case you haven't noticed, we're out of both. I'm not eating elephant rat for 2 days in a row." Kyoshi pulled her lips over her teeth in frustration. They touted the seriousness of the oath so much that she thought they'd start treating her like an equal after she took them. Instead, they were treating her like Lek. She had to establish a better position in the hierarchy, or else this would go on forever. As Wong reached down to pick up a blanket, she stepped on it, pinning it to the ground. He stood up and gave her a stare that had probably heralded countless brawls in the past. Kyoshi crossed her arms and met his gaze. He wasn't more dangerous than Tagaka or Jiang Shu. After trying to deal death through the power of his mind alone, Wong broke the silence. "Keep being a brat and I'll never teach you how to use your fans," he said. Kyoshi was going to retort out of instinct, but the implication made her pause and step back. She pulled out one of her fans. "You know how to use these?" They'd been a puzzle so far. Rangi had taken a look at the weapons earlier, tested their balance, and concluded she couldn't teach Kyoshi much about them, other than using them as short, heavy clubs in their folded state. They're not part of the Fire Academy curriculum, she said with a shrug. Maybe you can sneak them into places you couldn't take a sword. Wong plucked the fang out of Kyoshi's hand and snapped it open. He tossed it into the air and it spun perfectly around its pivot pin, the leaf tracing circles as it flew. He twirled around himself and caught the fan behind his back before lifting it coquettishly to his face. The peony shed its beauty before the moon, he sang in a deep, beautiful, vibrant voice, using the surface of the fan to reflect and amplify the sound. Shamed by the light of a spirit so pure, I leap to catch its petals and mourn for what I have left unsaid. He thrust the fan all around him in a series of flitting gestures, the leaf opening and closing rapidly like the beating of insect wings. It was an expertly performed dance, but Kyoshi knew it could also have been a sequence of attacks, defensive weaving, evasion and retaliation against multiple opponents. With a flourish, Wong ended the performance in a traditional heroic pose, a deep stance with his arms spread wide, his head intentionally wobbling side to side with leftover energy from his motions. It was a showcase of classic poetry, older than old school. Auntie Mia would have fainted with delight. Kyoshi applauded, the only appropriate response to a display of skill that great. Where did that come from? She asked. Hark, we have a lineage through your father's side that traces back to one of the royal theatre schools in Ba Sing Se, Karima said. And we stay sharp enough for performing to have plausible cover in the cities we visit. We're the flying opera company, after all. She raised the leg behind her, over her head, and kept it going until she completed a forward-facing, no-handed cartwheel, a move that elite dancers saved for the climax of their performances. Karima looked like she could have done her market shopping traveling that way. Kyoshi was astonished. That would explain how they were so light on their feet. Royal theatre performers were known to be some of the most physically capable people in the Earth Kingdom, able to mimic dozens of martial styles on the stage and act out dangerous stunts without getting hurt. It made her feel better about the agreement they'd struck. She could get some extra value out of the bargain. Wong folded the fan and handed it back to her. I'll teach you to use this, he said, for 1/5 of your shares on any future jobs we do. Deal, Kyoshi said quickly. She didn't know what shares were, but she would have paid nearly any price to better understand her weapons. Rangi and Karima both smacked their hands against their foreheads, but for different reasons. You could have gotten at least half, Karima said to Wong. Lek popped his head around the side of Peng Peng. Do you want to get going, or do you want to sit here rubbing each other's backs all day? He said. Hey, Lek, guess who the newest member of the gang is? Karima said. Official and everything. Lek's eyebrows squeezed together in frustration. You cannot be serious, he yelled. He waved his arm at Kyoshi like she was a fake vase they'd brought home. She doesn't care about the code. She's a biter chaff. She's squarer than the hole in the Earth Kingdom's coin. And she has a bison, Kyoshi snapped. So unless you like walking, I suggest you deal with me being part of your stupid outlaw family. If Karima or Wong took offense to a regression in attitude towards Dao Fei, they didn't show it. I am never calling you kin, Lex spat. He went back to making final adjustments on Peng Peng's reins. He'd saddled the giant bison by himself, in impressive time too. Neither Kyoshi nor Rangi could find any fault with the work he'd done as they mounted Peng Peng. Lek took offense at their examination. I know what I'm doing, he said. I probably have more practice than you two. If we're being perfectly honest, our whole reputation was built on Jess's bison, Karima said. We might talk a good game, but Long Yang did all the work. Smuggling's a cinch when you can fly over checkpoints. She and Wong finished loading and climbed onto Peng Peng's back. Rangi marked her territory in the driver's seat, daring Lek to challenge her for it. He compensated for his downgrade in the pecking order by pulling a crude map out of his pocket. Real leaders navigated and scheduled. We're going to a meeting post in the mountains outside Ba Sing Se, he said, denting the paper with his finger. We'll get the latest news from other groups and find a few easy jobs to get our feet back into the water. Rangi lifted off. The late morning sun had yet to turn oppressive, and with the prep work having been done by extra hands, Peng Peng's unhurried climb into the cool air almost felt relaxing. How did the two of you get a bison? Lek's sudden question was tinged with suspicion and jealousy. Neither of you were raised air nomad, he said, and this girl would never let you fly her unless she'd already known you for a long time. Did you steal her from an airbender friend? In her head, Kyoshi silently thanked Lek for reminding her of her duty. This was where she needed to stay, down in the muck, painted in hatred for herself and her enemy, not flying in the wind with Kelsang. Yes, Kyoshi said. I did. Rangi gave her a worried glance, not understanding why she'd lie. Lex shook his head in disgust. Separating a monk from their bison, he said. That's cold. Though I should have expected much low behavior from someone who doesn't respect their mother and father. Kyoshi said nothing and stared into the distance, where the horizon broke into jagged formations against the sky. The empty feeling was good. It absolved her of choice, allowed her to think of herself as merely a vessel, an agent of balance. But her tranquility was broken when she noticed something missing. Wait, she said, turning around in the saddle. Where's Lao Gi? Obligations. I always had a feeling I would be undone by a fancy party, Zhang Shu muttered. He and Heiran were in the main library, surrounded by the map collection. The best and comically worst representations of the known world were posted on the walls behind panes of flawless crystal. Ragged, heavily used pages from nautical chart books hung next to cloth maps stained the color of smoked tea. Zhang Shu liked this room. It portrayed the advancement of human understanding. Heiran had insisted they meet twice a day since the incident, regardless of whether there had been any updates. This afternoon, there had been an update. She finished reading the invitation stamped with the insignia of the flying boar and tossed it on the desk. The Beifong family wishes to hold a celebration for the Avatar, commemorating his victory over the pirates of the Eastern Sea in front of the gathered sages of the Earth Kingdom. Zhang Shu, this is a bigger disaster than that victory. I thought Liu Beifong agreed to be hands-off when it came to the Avatar. He did. It's who is behind this. Zhang Shu rolled the letter opener between his fingers, longing for a sharper implement and something to stick it in. He's been at this game for the past year or so, whispering in Liu's ear that training the Avatar should be left to a man of such humble origins. He put a blunt metal knife down. Hugh may have a point. Look how Kuruk turned out. We were kids back then, and so was Kuruk, Heiran said. It wasn't our responsibility to raise him. Hugh still presents it as a strike against us, Zhang Shu said. Did Shaw respond about Shishos? No, and even if he did, there wouldn't be enough time before this party. One thing Heiran shared with Zhang Shu was a disdain for frivolities. She cracked her knuckles. We could say the Avatar is sick. We could, but then I look like a bad guardian who can't keep the most important child in the world healthy. Who will send doctors, herbalists, and spiritual healers, all insisting they see the Avatar in person for treatment? Every time we turn his agents away, it'll sow more suspicion among the other sages. No, the truth will get out, Zhang Shu said, leaning back in his chair. It's simply a matter of how long we can delay it. Heiran's military mind was already adapting. Then we need to consolidate your allies. Find out which sages will stick by you after this debacle comes to light. It's going to end up with your faction against his, and right now we don't have a count of those numbers. Zhang Shu smiled as a possibility dangled in his head, waiting to be tugged. He could always count on his friend to seed him with ideas. These forced meetings had paid off. We need to do something like that, he said. He drummed the tips of his fingers together. What's your wardrobe looking like these days? Heiran gave him a stare that said he should be glad she didn't have the letter opener in her hands. I just wanted to make sure you have a nice gown ready, he said innocently. We have a fancy party to attend. Without Peng Peng, they made the trip to Gaoling the old-fashioned way, slowly, in a big caravan, with lots of gifts in tow. By the time they arrived at the estate, Zhang Shu had come up with a new policy he would have to enact. Earthbenders, the most elite in the kingdom, needed to flatten out every single inch of the roads. No cost would be too great if it meant never having to suffer another skull-bouncing, teeth-clacking journey over bumpy paths. He stepped out of his move-in prison cell and squinted into the shining glory of Beifong Manor. If there was anything he'd learned while he was building his own estate in Yokoya, it was that rich people's houses were all essentially the same. Walls to keep the townsfolk out. A garden as big as possible to display humility before nature. A residential quarter where that humility was tossed on its ear, preferably with as much gold and silver inlay as possible. Chamberlain Hu greeted them at the head of a column of footmen. The short, stocky bureaucrat shielded himself from the sun with a parasol. Master Zhang Shu, he said, raising the shade to reveal a grizzled, brick-like face. It always surprised Zhang Shu how the man looked as if he'd spent his days breaking rocks with a pickaxe when the heaviest object he lifted was his master's ivory seal. How was your journey? Unnecessary and grating like you. Most pleasant, Chamberlain Hu. Most pleasant indeed. And so is the utmost delight to survey our magnificent nation up close. The next carriage in the train pulled up. ostrich horses stamping their feet until the weight behind them came to a halt. Hu opened the door himself, probably so that he could be the first to take the hand of the occupant. "Headmistress," he said, providing Heiran a necessary help out. "You look radiant. I'd swear you've stepped out of pages of Yun Zhen's finest love poetry." He angled his parasol as if the sun would be deadly on his skin. It wasn't like heat and light from the sky were the source of her incredible powers, no. Heiran barely disguised her shudder at Hu being the first sight after the carriage. "Former headmistress," she corrected. "Ah, but educators deserve the utmost respect for life," Hu said, his words and smile coated in oil. "Or so I've always believed." Zhang Shu felt terrible for his friend in these situations. Being a rich, beautiful, well-connected widow drew a certain breed of suitor out of the woodwork. Men like Hu could interpret the most hostile snubs as part of ongoing courtship dance, refusing to consider the possibility that Heiran wanted nothing to do with them. "And when will Master Kelsang be joining us?" Hu said, his fingers lingering on Heiran until she yanked them away. "I noticed Avatar Yun is not with you. I assume they'll be arriving together shortly?" The Chamberlain's eyes darted around their faces, checking the corners of their lips, the dilation of their irises for involuntary twitches. Zhang Shu knew that Hu played a game of details. Induction. He turned slight hints into broad generalizations that he poured into the ears of Liu Beifong and the other sages. Right now, the Avatar choosing to travel with Kelsang was obviously the sign of a slight crack, a burgeoning rift between Yun and Zhang Shu, wasn't it? Zhang Shu thought back to how he'd threatened the true Avatar. On that day, everything had gone to pieces. The net cast by his power and influence over the Earth Kingdom was real, but it required constant, exhausting effort to maintain. The challenges he'd stamped out since Kurik's death were too many to count. And now, here was the last generation of Parasite, catching him at his most vulnerable. "They are together, yes," Zhang Shu said. He noticed the way Heiran flinched beside him. Hu saw it too. With a smile, the Chamberlain led them to the receiving hall. The interior of the Beifong estate suffered from the rare sickness of wealth-induced monotony. It was covered from floor to ceiling in the same queasy brownish-green paint that had at one point been the most expensive shade in the Earth Kingdom. It was meant to show off just how rich the family was. But these days, the main affected hand was making Zhang Shu feel like he was being slowly digested in the acidic maw of a scavenger. At the gullet of the columned hall was a double-seated dais where, over many generations, the leader of the Beifong clan and their spouse had held court. These days, only one side of it remained occupied. Liu Beifong, Zhang Shu's old master, sat on the oversized throne, his dust-colored robes making a tent around his wizened head at the peak. It may have looked like a mummy held together by silk threads and spite, but his mind was aggressive as ever. "Headmistress, wonderful to see you as always," he squawked, acknowledging Heiran as fast as he could before turning to Zhang Shu. "What's this about a loan for the Southern Water Tribe?" He didn't ask about the Avatar. Nothing like a business transaction to get the old lizard crow tunneled in. Zhang Shu had almost forgotten about the request he'd made to Beifong after the battle with the pirates. Work hadn't stopped simply because the Avatar's identity had been in doubt. He bowed deeply before answering. "Sifu, I made that request because the encounter with Tagaka brought up an issue of balance between the four nations," he said. "The Southern Water Tribe could use assistance in developing a legitimate navy. Tagaka's presence was stifling any movement in that direction. With more far-ranging deep-water ships, they could prosper from trade and protect themselves from their neighbors, much like their northern cousins. The loan would be for the construction of such vessels." "We are their neighbors, Master Zhang Shu," Hu said, materializing by Lu's side. "Why would we want to give them any position of strength relative to the Earth Kingdom? Why, they might try to claim the contested Chuji Islands with such a fleet." A familiar rage raised the hairs on the back of Zhang Shu's neck. He had no real stake in this matter, not even personal greed. There was no reason for him to want the Southern Water Tribe to remain poor and undeveloped and vulnerable. It was simply opposition for opposition's sake. Somewhere down the line, Hu had decided to make his name by using Zhang Shu's as a ladder, and a straw man, and whatever other analogy applied. It was easier for Hu to gain political power and fame by tearing down Zhang Shu's work than doing his own. No matter how logical and beneficial Zhang Shu's actions were, Hu would undercut them. He pushed to end treaties that had taken years to develop, brushing them off as unnecessary when, in truth, he didn't understand how they worked and didn't care. He stoked petty rivalries and didn't have to, toying with peace that Zhang Shu had earned. Had Hu been around during the height of the Yellowneck atrocities, he would have insisted on treating the madman Zhu Ping-an like a folk hero. It was times like these when Zhang Shu found himself sorely missing the influence of Lu's wife, Lady Wu Mei. She had been an intelligent and vivacious woman, beloved across the kingdom, and a source of wisdom in Lu's ear. After her death, the old man had become more obstinate, and Hu's bold destructiveness had accelerated. I've spoken to the southern chieftains, and they're excited about the prospect, Zhang Shu said. They proposed a compact of mutual defense. It's a good idea, Master Beifong, Heiran said, adding an outsider's perspective. Right now, the group's most capable of projecting force over the Eastern Sea is ironically the Fire Navy. I'm sure the Earth Kingdom and Southern Water Tribe would prefer to command their own waters. Lu didn't look convinced. Zhang Shu didn't want this opportunity to slip away. If it's about the Chiji Islands, they're worthless, he said. They serve no strategic purpose other than puffing up national pride. He realized his mistake as soon as he said it. It wasn't like him to blunder so. Master Zhang Shu, Hu said with fake horror, surely there is no matter more important than the pride and love we have for our country. The Earth King has been vexed over those islands since his coronation. Surely you are not questioning His Majesty's judgment. Zhang Shu would have liked nothing better than to maroon both the Earth King and Hu in one of those desolate atolls and see which idiot ate the other first. Before he could respond, Lu waved his hand. Enough. He heaved himself to a standing position. It was barely noticeable given his hunch. I side with the Chamberlain. There will be no Lone and no Southern Water Tribe Navy unless I hear a convincing argument from the Avatar himself. I notice the boy is late. You can find me in the banquet hall with the other guests when he arrives. Lu shuffled out of the receiving hall, the only noise the rasping of his slippers against the floor. Zhang Shu couldn't believe it. Just like that, the future had changed for the worse. The Southern Water Tribe would remain impoverished and outpaced by the rest of the world, all because Hu wanted to win a debate at a party. The stupid, smug whims of one unworthy man had left fingerprints on history that weren't likely to be erased. The Avatar could have made the difference, Zhang Shu reminded himself. The thought stuck through him like a javelin. Master Zhang Shu, I apologize for making a counter-argument, Hu said. But as you know, it's my duty to Master Beifong to make sure both sides are considered in any important decision. Both sides was a rhetorical weapon used by hypocrites and the ignorant. As far as Zhang Shu was concerned, she was no better than a Dao Fei, wantonly burning fields of grain because he enjoyed watching the smoke rise over the horizon. I would show you what I do to Dao Fei. Chamberlain, it's quite all right, Zhang Shu said. I always appreciate your voice in such matters. He hesitated, adding a hitch of uncertainty to his body language, the trembling of a man who was hiding the strain of a great burden. In fact, I need your wisdom more than ever right now. Can you join me and the headmistress to talk in private? The upside to the sudden confession was watching Hu nearly collapse in surprise. The man grabbed the desk in his office for support and knocked over a bottle of ink. The black liquid dripped down the Chamberlain's sleeve like blood from a wound. You lost the Avatar? He shrieked. Zhang Shu wasn't worried about being overheard. He knew from a glance at the walls that Hu had built his plan and adorned personal study for soundproofing. It was a safe room of secrets for a man who trafficked in them. The more dangerous element here was Heiran. Zhang Shu hadn't told her he was going to tell Hu, because she would never have agreed to it. He risked driving her away in this very moment. It's as I explained, he said. Yun and I had an argument about his bending progress. More than an argument, really. I said things to him I never should have said. It got out of hand, and he ran away with Kelsing's help. On a bison, the two of them could have gone anywhere in the world. Heiran's face was remarkably still. The slight temperature increase in the room betrayed her emotions. It added to the effect of Zhang Shu's ploy. Hu was still shocked, but the wheels in his mind were already beginning to turn, his chest heaving for dramatic effect more than a need for air. I thought the monk was the equivalent of a decorative hermit living on your estate, he said, not a good enough actor to keep out the sneer of disdain. He was a companion of Kuruk and my friend, you little toad. He was, or so I thought. I didn't realize he'd been plotting, waiting to seize the right moment. Our relationship had suffered over the years, but I could never have expected to this extent. Zhang Shu punched the air, letting his real frustrations shine through. It's Yun I should have understood better. I don't know if the damage can ever be repaired. It can't be that bad, he said, hoping with his entire heart it was truly that bad. Children are volatile at that age. He swore upon his own avatarhood that he would never accept me as his master again. Zhang Shu ran his thumb and forefinger over his eyes. Chamberlain Hu, I am begging you for assistance here. The stability of our own nation is paramount. If word gets out that Yun has gone rogue, then there'll be chaos. The crack that Hugh had been hoping for turned out to be the gulf the size of the Great Divide. He hadn't been prepared to strike this much gold. Master Jiangsu, there are several prominent Earth Kingdom sages, including our benefactor, waiting for the Avatar in the Grand Hall, he said, thrusting his hands at the walls. Jiangsu put on a mask he'd never worn before. Helplessness. He let his silence answer for him. Hugh composed himself, wanting to reflect the new state of affairs. He was the man in charge now. He straightened his collar and clicked his heels together. Unfortunately for him, he also forgot about the ink on his sleeve, ruining the effect of tidiness. Master Jiangsu, there is no need to worry, he replied. I'll handle this. In the end, Hugh told Liu Beifong and the assembled sages the exact line that Jiangsu had used on his own household. Yun felt he'd been neglecting his spiritual studies. After much pleading, Jiangsu had given him leave to travel alone with Kelsang on a nomadic journey of self-discovery, avoiding such obvious destinations as the air temples or the northern oasis. Yun had been to those places. He needed to grow along his own path, untrammeled by expectations. He meant no contact from the Avatar for a while. The world would have to get along without one until further notice. Jiangsu could have said as much himself, but coming from Hugh, the story was so much more effective. It was an open secret among the party guests that the Chamberlain was waging political war against him. The only thing they would ever align on were basic and controvertible facts, like the Avatar going on a vacation. The rest of the visit was spent on trivialities. Jiangsu weathered the severe annoyance and biting remarks of Liu Beifong, wondering how many more years he'd have to put up with groveling before his former Sifu. The old man seemed like he would never kick the bucket with debtors owed him money, while debtors owed him money, and nearly the entire Earth Kingdom banked with the House of the Flying Boar. Heiran stood dull-eyed in the corner as men prodded for her thoughts on remarriage, in language they thought was subtle and flattering. Some of them, upon hearing her rebuff, immediately pivoted to inquiring about her daughter. Jiangsu never understood how she resisted the temptation to bend scorched holes into the ceiling when her element was always available. They left when the party became too much to bear, getting into a single carriage for the journey back. Heiran's admirers could have interpreted that a certain way, but the two of them simply needed to talk. I know you're angry with me, Jiangsu said. He slumped back against the seat. About what? Heiran snapped. The fact that you revealed your biggest setback to your worst enemy? That you're piling lies upon lies for no reason I can see? Why didn't you tell Hugh the excuse he gave to the crowd? Because vulnerability equals truth. The only statement of mine Hugh would take at face value was one that left me exposed. Now my story's set with the vast majority of the Earth Kingdom. I only have a single opponent to worry about. He didn't look very confident in his tactic. Firebenders thought in terms of positive Jing, always staying on the offensive. It's getting a little difficult to keep track on the wind spewing out of your mouth at this point. Imagine how hard it is for me. All warfare is based on deception, he said. Isn't that a Fire Nation quote? Heiran suddenly pulled a hairpin out of her tightly bundled style and hurled it against the wall of the coach. It clattered to the floor, the arms bent. For the first time today, Jiangsu was truly alarmed. For a Fire Nation native to treat her hair, her top knot, this way meant she felt she was losing her honor. He waited patiently for her to speak. Jiangsu, I pushed that boy to the breaking point, she said, her voice hoarse. He might not have been a firebender, and he might not have been the Avatar, but Yoon was still my student. I had an obligation to him, and I failed. Hearing his name all night must have been eating at her. The absent Avatar was still the toast of the party, his conquest of the pirates turning into legend through word of mouth. We can still make this right, Jiangsu said. We simply need to find Kyoshi. Everything will be fine after that. If that's the case, and I don't think it is, you set ablaze the time we have left and scatter the ashes. As soon as that party is over, who's going to march straight to the other sages and tell them what you told him? He might not wait. It'll be the conversation topic over dessert. It'll be longer than that, Jiangsu said. He's not going to waste an opportunity of this magnitude by hurrying. In fact, if he plays the information too quickly and carelessly, it'll bite him in the end. He's a man of self-preservation. Heiran tucked herself into the corner of the carriage, her bunched-up gown turning her into a shapeless mass. I wish I could say the same about you these days. To get the last word in, she aggressively went to sleep. Jiangsu noticed that people who were former military could doze off anywhere, anytime, at the drop of a hat. After an hour of silence, he began to drift in and out of consciousness himself, shaken awake by the occasional road bump, his thoughts forming loose connections and ideas that he made no attempt to preserve. It wouldn't do to plot too far out. Sometimes the best option was to sit quietly until the next step arrived in turn, like an earthbender should. Natural Jing. When they arrived home in Yokoya, there was a very validating delivery waiting for them. Zhang Shu didn't bother waking up Heiran and hopped out of the coach, invigorated by the sight. In the distance, by the stables, were two extremely large wooden boxes, each the size of a small hut, peppered with little holes. The sides of the crates had "Danger" and "Give Wide Berth" painted on them in a slapdash manner. Surrounding them was a crew of underpaid university students warily brandishing long-forked prods. They pointed their weapons inward at the boxes. Theft of the contents was not the primary concern. At the head of the group was a portly older gentleman in fine robes, wearing a helmet made of cork. He was geared for adventure in the habit of academics who had no idea how dirty and bloody true adventure could get. "Professor Shaw!" Zhang Shu called out. The man waved back. Behind him, the boxes suddenly started rattling and jumping, scaring the handlers. A long whip-like strand shot out of a hole, punched into the side, and lashed two of the nearest students across the face and neck before they could react. They screamed and collapsed to the ground in a heap like rag dolls. Professor Shaw looked at his downed interns and gave Zhang Shu a big grin and a thumbs up. That must have meant the Shushu were in good health after their journey. Excellent. Zhang Shu needed them in peak condition. The beast's impeccable sense of smell would let them track a target across a continent, oceans if the rumors were to be believed. He'd sent word out to his subordinates across the kingdom, the magistrates and prefects he'd spent years buying off, telling them to be on the lookout for two girls who had escaped his estate. But it never hurt to have a backup plan that didn't rely on shifting loyalty and ballooning greed of men. One way or another, he was going to fulfill his promise to the Avatar. There would be no hiding for Kyoshi. Not in this world.